Chapter 896. After cutting off the ears of the dead gnolls, the group quickly left the forest and returned to the main road, heading west. When they passed by Shichuan Fortress, the three young men did not forget to give the ears to the garrison officer in exchange for a gold coin and 20 silver coins. Feeling the beautiful sound of the coins clinking in the leather bag, the young man in the lead had an excited smile on his face. He secretly glanced at Adam, who was walking in front, then asked his companions in a low voice, "Mia, George, what do you think this honorable mage is going to do at the seaside?" "I don't know. Anyway, as long as it doesn't violate the laws of the Stormwind Kingdom, we'll do whatever he wants us to do." The young man called George shrugged indifferently. "I think this mage just wants us to lead the way. I believe all of you saw it. There were so many terrifying gnolls, but he only used one finger to kill them all. This kind of terrifying magic power doesn't need our protection at all, does it?" The only girl in the team, Mia, whispered her opinion in a low voice. "Makes sense. Anyway, we're just a group of insignificant people. No matter what this mage teaches us in the end, we won't lose out. Moreover, he also gave us precious alchemy potions, which made the wound disappear in an instant." As he spoke, the young man touched his arm that was still bleeding not long ago. Now, the wound had long since healed, leaving only a red mark. The power of magic. How good would it be if I could also become a mage, even if it was the lowest level of apprentice? George looked at Adam, who was walking in front of him, with incomparable envy. Although he was only the son of a poor farmer, his heart was full of dreams and expectations for the future. Otherwise, he would not have risked his life to leave his home and family and embark on a dangerous adventure. In contrast, Mia was much more realistic. She smiled bitterly and comforted him. "Forget it, George. Have you forgotten that the most important thing to become a mage is intelligence and profound knowledge? You can't even read. How can you become a mage? As long as he's willing to teach me some shooting skills, I'll be satisfied. I want to learn the skills of a warrior, especially rage. As long as I master this, I can use some powerful moves and no longer have to worry about being surrounded by monsters." The young man held the hilt of his sword tightly and gritted his teeth as he talked to himself. While the three youngsters were whispering behind them, they had no idea that Adam, who was walking in front of them, had already heard everything clearly. He even revealed a slightly mocking smile, because he knew that when he threw the crystal into the whirlpool in the center of the endless ocean, his creator and master would borrow the boundless energy of the planet to open a teleportation gate. After that, all the energy and astral souls would be sucked dry. By then, even if the entire planet did not shatter, the magma deep in the Earth's core that had lost its restraints would gush out, destroying all the animals, plants, and even civilizations on the surface. Apart from fire and earth elementals, there would not be a third type of life that could survive in this world. As for going to the Western Wilderness, it was mainly to avoid the spies of Storm City's MI-7 and build a ship that could enter the deep sea without anyone knowing. As for the pitiful Murlocs and gnolls, they would become free laborers, sailors, and slaves under the influence of the charm magic. As an artificial life born from a computer program, Adam was not bound by the moral constraints of human society at all. He had not even established his outlook on life, values, and worldview. The only thing he wanted to do now was to serve his master and help him achieve his grand ambitions. 50 kilometers was not far, but it was not near either. After traveling quickly for about 6 hours, the group finally arrived at the northeasternmost beach in the Western Wilderness. But as expected, they were warmly welcomed by more than 100 Murlocs. "Wahaha!" Accompanied by their signature cry, these densely packed little monsters covered in yellow-green scales rushed to the shore. It was obvious that they wanted to kill the enemies who had invaded their territory and eat the corpses as their dinner. Sir Mage, I think it's better if we retreat first. There are too many Murlocs here." George bit his lower lip hard, his two legs trembling uncontrollably. It was important to know that he had never received professional combat training. Not to mention hundreds of Murlocs. Even dealing with 2 of them would be difficult. "Don't worry. They won't be able to get here. Adam's eyes flashed red again, and suddenly he raised his hand and shot out a scorching fireball. The next second, boom, the fireball exploded in the middle of the murlocs, releasing a shockingly high-temperature flame. At least 20 of them were burned to death on the spot, and the number of injured was more than twice the number of dead. Feeling the heat wave and the burnt smell, George could not help but shiver, and muttered to himself, "My holy light, this is too cool. Do you want to learn?" Adam glanced at the young man and asked in a cold tone without a trace of emotion. Of course I want to learn. Are you willing to teach me?" George was so excited that his voice was trembling. "I can teach you, but you have to pass a small test first. Here, this is a magic orb. What you have to do is to bring it to the murlocs and find their leader. If you can complete it before the sky turns dark, I will begin to teach you magic knowledge. But if you can't, then it means that you do not have the qualifications to become a mage apprentice. Remember, you have to complete this task alone, and you're not allowed to ask your companions for help." After saying this, Adam placed a gemstone with a red luster in the young man's hand and walked to the side of a huge rock alone. He took out a pen and paper and began to write and draw, completely ignoring the murlocs who were scared out of their wits by the fireball and were running in all directions. A test to become a mage apprentice? George's mind was now filled with this sentence, and without another word, he ran in the direction where the murlocs were the most concentrated, not thinking about what would happen to him if he was surrounded by murlocs. The other two young men in the group also felt a wave of envy and came to Adam's side and asked carefully, "Sir, is there anything we can do for you?" "Yes. We also hope to be of service to you." "Oh, since you are so enthusiastic, then take the other two orbs and go to the knoll camp near the coastline, and then bring all of them back." Adam took out 2 more gemstones without hesitation. "Bring them back." Mia held the gemstones in her hand that looked very valuable, and her eyes were filled with doubt. "Yes, it's to bring them back, not to kill them. This gemstone is enchanted with charm magic, and as long as they stare at it for a few seconds, they will be unable to extricate themselves." Chapter 897. Based on Azeroth's level of productivity, how long would it take to build a ship from scratch that could sail to the deep sea? The answer was at least a year, from cutting down trees to drying them in the shade, and then processing them into various standard boards and keels. The process was complicated and took a long time. It was far beyond the imagination of laymen. This was especially true for warships used for naval battles. Even with the power of magic, it would take more than 2 years to build one. It was precisely because of this that the coastal kingdom of Kul Tiras, which had exquisite shipbuilding technology and a large number of warships, could become the world's most powerful navy. Whether it was the Horde or the ambitious green-skinned goblins, it was almost impossible for them to surpass the former. However, for Adam, who had stored countless advanced technologies and information, building an ocean-going ship did not take that long. In just about 2 weeks, he commanded the merfolk and gnolls to work hard and complete the most important keel of the ship. At this speed, the entire ship would be completed in about a month at most, and it would slowly sail to the great whirlpool of the endless sea. Of course, the reason why he spent so much effort to build his ship in such a remote place like the coastline of the Western Wilderness was mainly to not attract the attention of anyone or any forces as much as possible. It would be best if no one knew that there was a crazy guy spying on the soul of this planet before the portal opened. Otherwise, if he was discovered by those annoying guardian dragons or the guards left behind by the Titans, it would not be easy to open the portal again. After all, Adam had heard from his master that the Dark Titan Sargeras had spent a lot of effort to invade this world and had failed many times. It could be said that he was the shame of the Titans. His reputation had been thrown far away by who knew how many light years away. Just as he was thinking about how to avoid the patrolling Alliance warships, pirates, and the annoying merfolk and nagas in the sea, and finally safely reached the great whirlpool, he suddenly heard a young voice behind him. "Mr. Mage, the things you wanted are here." A young man was driving a carriage piled with wooden boxes, parked on a slope near the beach not far away. It was George, who had gone to Stormwind City not long ago to purchase tools and parts. Well done. Adam roughly scanned the goods in the carriage and quickly nodded with satisfaction. Buying so many nails, axes, saws, and hammers at one time. Did it cause any trouble? No. We're only buying tools and spare parts, not weapons. Those nobles won't care. As he spoke, George jumped down from the carriage and handed the whole carriage to the knoll laborers under the control of magic. After a while, these guys began to move the sealed wooden boxes one by one and sent them next to the huge keel. Here, this is the magic experience I've recently taken some time to copy down. Take it and study it well. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask. Adam casually handed over 2 pieces of parchment paper filled with tiny words. When George heard the word magic, he immediately became excited. He quickly flipped through the book in his hand. After about a minute or two, he suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and bowed deeply like the nobles of Stormwind City. Thank you very much for your generosity and kindness. I swear that from now on, no matter what you ask me to do, I will do it without hesitation. And 2. Through showing his power, imparting knowledge, and combat skills, he had completely won the trust of the other party. Now, even if the 3 young people were to go against the Stormwind Kingdom, it would not be a problem. As a typical feudal country, the Stormwind Kingdom was actually jointly ruled by the royal family, nobles, and religion. They almost monopolized all the education and promotion channels. No matter how hard the civilians worked, they could not become the heroes in the bard's stories. Therefore, if someone was willing to share their knowledge with the civilians would often erupt with unprecedented enthusiasm and even join some secret societies. Kel'Thuzad used this to secretly develop the cult of the cursed among the civilians. In just a few years, he had countless fanatical believers. Some even voluntarily sacrificed themselves for the cause of the Lich King. Unfortunately, George did not know how cold and dark the heart of this seemingly strict teacher in front of him was. He nodded gratefully and said, "Sorry, sir, I was too excited. You may not know, but a farmer's son like me is lucky to have the opportunity to learn magic. It was you who changed my fate." "Ah, yes, I did change your fate, but I'm not sure whether this change is good or bad. You have to understand that magic is not easy to obtain. Every year, countless apprentices die from all kinds of accidents. Even if you're lucky enough to live to become a mage, you may be targeted by demons." Adam imitated the tone of his creator and said these philosophical words. "Whether it is good or bad, I will be grateful from the bottom of my heart. You may not know, but there's a saying in the farms of Elwyn Forest. It is better to be a dead hero and control your fate than to be a mediocre farmer and be toyed with by fate for the rest of your life." George replied firmly. As the arcane energy continued to grow in his body, his ambition began to sprout. He was no longer willing to be an ordinary adventurer, helping the guards around Stormwind City to clear out monsters like gnolls, murlocs, kobolds, and other monsters in exchange for a meager bounty and muddle-headed life. He yearned for the sky, for freedom, for a broader stage, and for more people to respect and love him. Feeling the youth's restless heart, Adam's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness that was hard to detect. He invited him without batting an eyelid. "You are very smart and have a lot of potential. If you are willing, you can go out to sea with me. I will find time to teach you some of the true secrets of magic on the way." "Of course. It would be my honor. Also, can I call you teacher?" George raised his head, his face full of anticipation. "Ha ha ha. You want to be my apprentice? That is not an easy thing to do. You have to understand that I am very strict in choosing my apprentices. If you have the confidence, you can give it a try." Adam could not help but laugh out loud. He did not know why, but he suddenly felt that it was very ironic. He wanted to see if this young man would collapse or fall into the abyss at the last moment of his life after knowing the truth. "I have the confidence to accept any test from you, teacher." George was still unaware of the tragic fate he was about to face. His eyes were filled with determination. "All right, then let us wait and see. Oh, by the way, your other 2 friends should be back soon. Here is a warrior's rage technique and an elven ranger's archery technique. Help me pass it to them. Chapter 898. While Adam was busy building the ship, a spy quietly passed through the Elwyn forest and returned to the old district of Stormwind City. He sneaked into the second floor of a hidden building while no one was paying attention. Matthias Shaw was sitting on a chair at the moment, looking relaxed as he flipped through the information sent back by his men. Ever since the return of King Varian Rin, the burden on his shoulders had suddenly lightened. Although he still had to spread out a large number of spies to spy on the enemy forces, at least he did not have to constantly be on guard against his own people like when the Princess of the Black Dragon, Onyxia, was still around. The spy did not say a word and quickly walked to the leader of MI7. He lowered his voice and reported, "Master, I found a suspicious guy on the beach of the Western Wilderness. He is using murlocs and gnolls to build a ship." "Oh, tell me more details." Matthias Shaw casually threw a piece of parchment into the brazier with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "I'm sorry, I don't know the details. I only know that the mysterious man seems to be a mage. He is followed by 3 young people who were born in the Elwyn Forest farm. He teaches them some knowledge and combat skills every day. Moreover, he seems to have mastered a method of building ships quickly. It only took him about 2 weeks to build the keel of a large ship." The spy spoke very quickly and poured out all the information he had gathered over the past few days. "Mage? Does he wear anything that shows his identity? For example, the ring of the Kirin Tor Council?" Matthias Shaw asked as he stroked the beard on his chin. The spy hesitated for a few seconds and immediately shook his head. No, he doesn't have anything that shows his identity. He doesn't even carry a staff like most mages. But I can guarantee that he is very dangerous. If I get even a little closer, even if I stay in stealth mode, I will immediately alert him." Interesting. A powerful mage enslaving murlocs and gnolls to build a ship on the Western Wilderness coast? What is he trying to do? Matthias Shaw crossed his legs, and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. The Western Wilderness was a very sensitive place. On one hand, Edwin Van Cleef had led the Defias Brotherhood to establish a separatist regime a few years ago, giving the Stormwind Council a headache. Even now, there were still many remnants of the Brotherhood who would jump out from time to cause panic and destruction. On the other hand, the Western Wilderness was too close to Stormwind City. Especially after the port was completed, it would only take a few hours to launch a surprise attack from the sea. Therefore, when people heard that someone was secretly building a ship in the Western Wastelands, it was inevitable that they would associate it with something bad. "Master, do we need to send some men to tie this guy up and interrogate him slowly?" The spy suggested cautiously. Matthias Shaw smiled and waved his hand. "No, that would be too reckless, and it might not succeed. Do you know what it means to be able to use magic to permanently charm a large number of murlocs and gnolls?" Does that mean he's a powerful mage?" The spy blinked uncertainly. "That's for sure, but that's not the most important thing. Most importantly, he had the ability to recruit an army of monsters at any time. There's no doubt that this is a threat, or at least a potential threat. We have to deal with it properly. Send 2 men to keep an eye on him 24/7, and report to us immediately if there's any abnormality. Remember, don't do anything unnecessary, and don't provoke him." Matthias Shaw quickly gave out orders after careful consideration. As an experienced master assassin, his most praiseworthy trait was patience, unparalleled patience. At the same time, on the other side of the universe on planet Argus, Chromie and Illidan Stormridge's souls silently returned to the burning throne. Just as they were about to enter the room where the sleeping Titan was locked up, they suddenly heard a furious roar from within. Bastard! Where's that damn guy? Can someone explain to me?" There was no need to ask to know that the owner of this voice was none other than one of the most trusted right-hand men of the Dark Titan Sargeras, the adjutant of the Supreme Commander of the Burning Legion, Deceiver Kill Jaden. "I'm very sorry, Great Deceiver, but we don't know where he went. I've checked the records and didn't detect any energy to activate magic teleportation." Another demon explained in a helpless tone. "Shut up. I don't want to hear excuses. I'll give you 3 days to find him. Otherwise, I guarantee that you'll regret being born into this world. Kill, Jaden threatened fiercely. I'll try my best. This demon obviously didn't have much confidence and walked out of the room after giving casual reply. He disappeared at the end of the corridor as if he was fleeing for his life. Chromie seemed to realize something when he heard this and waved at Illidan's Stormridge soul before hiding in an inconspicuous corner. After confirming that there weren't any demons nearby, she lowered her voice and complained with a face full of despair. He's gone. He abandoned me and ran away alone. We're done for. It's all your fault. You had to drag me around the top again and again. Is it all right now? We're all trapped here. You mean? Eggy's soul frowned subconsciously and suddenly had a bad feeling. Yes, that guy most likely killed Jaden and then ran away himself. What do we do? What do we do? Can we return to Azeroth alive from this demon-filled planet? Chromie began to pull at his hair, and his eyes were full of despair. There is no way not to despair, especially for a bronze dragon like her. If she fell into the hands of the army, it wouldn't be as simple as death. She might even be corrupted by evil energy and become what she hated the most. In contrast, Illidan's Stormrage, who was in his soul state, was unusually calm. He stood in place and thought for a moment before immediately asking, "You said before that he was studying how to transform himself into a Titan, right?" "That's right." Chromie nodded without hesitation. That means that he must have gotten what he wanted, so he chose to leave without hesitation. Illidan came to her own conclusion after a little analysis. As a former close ally, she undoubtedly knew that the young human was a true madman, whether in terms of his thoughts or his soul. What was even more frightening was that this madman had the ability to put his thoughts into action. What? You mean he turned himself into a Titan? Chromie opened his mouth in shock and couldn't close it for a long time. Why, you think it's strange? Don't forget, according to what you said, he had successfully merged himself with Sardra's remains, so it's not impossible for him to go one step further. Chapter 899. Time flew by, and a month passed by quickly. On the coastline of the western wilderness, a huge wooden sailing ship had been completed. White sails were hung on the 3 towering masts. Countless murlocs, gnolls, and a small number of human sailors were busy loading and unloading the necessary food, water, and wine for the voyage, or checking the bottom of the hull to see if there were any traces of water seepage. As for Adam, he was standing on the deck and looking into the distance, patiently waiting for the tide to rise. Only when the tide completely submerged the beach could the ship named Dawn leave the land and sail into the sea. Just as he was measuring the depth of the sea with his eyes, the whole hull suddenly shook violently. Then he heard an old man with a beard shouting at the top of his voice, "Quick, raise the sails. Everyone get to the front of the deck. Holy light above. We are finally going out to sea." Mia screamed excitedly as she clutched the guardrail at the edge of the deck. After more than a month of training, she had learned a series of shooting skills that contained magic energy, including arcane shooting, multi-shot, wind arrow, and so on. She looked full of confidence, completely unlike the shy and timid country girl before. "Ha! The sea. We are coming. Oh my God. I didn't even dare to dream that I would be able to embark on a great adventure one day." Igor, the oldest of the 3, laughed loudly. This young man was wearing scale armor and carrying a 2-handed sword on his back. His arms were thick and strong, and his eyes revealed the unique determination of a warrior. As for George, who was the last to learn magic, he had already changed into a dark blue robe. He smiled and asked his teacher, "Sir, are we going to set off now?" "Yes. The tide is not over the side of the ship. As long as the wind is strong enough, we will be able to get this ship moving quickly." Adam nodded lightly and replied, "Creak." As the white sails were filled with the wind, the mast finally gave out a creaking sound. At the same time, the hull began to slowly move downwards. Due to the high tide, in less than 10 minutes, the ship left the beach and floated on the sea. It quickly left the coastline and headed towards the deep sea. Seeing that they were out of the dangerous waters full of hidden reefs, the old man who shouted at the beginning stepped in front of Adam and asked in a respectful tone, "Sir, where are we going first?" "The Shattered Isles, of course. I heard that there is the most incredible energy storm in all of Azeroth, and I want to experience it for myself." Adam pretended to be obsessed and made up an excuse. As a special life form evolved from artificial intelligence, he had long recognized that the old man in front of him, who claimed to be a pirate, was actually a spy sent by Storm City's MI7 to monitor him. However, in order to conceal his true purpose, he was not in a hurry to expose him, nor did he intend to throw him into the sea to feed the fishes. Instead, he made the best use of him and appointed him as the first mate of the ship, responsible for managing the crew and daily affairs. After all, as long as he did something that threatened the Alliance, not only would the spy not turn hostile, but he would also perform well and protect the entire plan. Damaged islands? A strange look flashed across the old man's eyes. He hurriedly bent down and bowed. Then, he turned around and loudly ordered the sailors to adjust the course. No one noticed that when he passed by the right side of the ship, he quietly threw a wine bottle with a note into the sea. When the ship gradually went away, a guy with an underwater breathing device suddenly came out of the sea, grabbed the bottle, and swam towards the coastline. Needless to say, the note in the bottle must have the destination of Dawn written on it. About 3 hours later, the bottle was finally handed over to Matthias Shore. The master assassin just glanced at it and immediately frowned. He muttered to himself, "The Shattered Isles? If I remember correctly, some time ago, the Horde sent a messenger to inform the king that a huge black dragon was found on the continent of Kalimdor. It was flying in the direction of the Shattered Isles, right?" "Yes, boss." For this, the Horde also sent the leader of the Darkspear tribe, Wajin. "We also sent an investigation team, led by the Kirin Tor Council's archmage, Anselm Ruinvawale. A young and beautiful female assassin with a slim figure threw a flirtatious glance and quickly gave a positive answer. But unfortunately, Matthias Shore was not too interested in women. He casually threw the note into the brazier and crossed his hands under his chin, lost in thought. After a full minute, he suddenly opened his mouth and asked, "What do you think this suspicious mage is going to the Shattered Isles for?" "Don't ask me, boss. I'm a thief. How would I know what's in a mage's mind?" A dwarf shrugged his shoulders with a helpless expression. The female assassin also shook her head, indicating that she didn't know either. "Two good-for-nothings. Forget it. Let's not talk about this first. Last time, I asked you to investigate the abnormality in the Undercity. How's the investigation going?" Matthias Shore raised his head, his eyes revealing a cold light that was as sharp as a blade. "We only found out that the Royal Pharmacists Association seems to have secretly transported a batch of sealed jars to no scent. As for what's inside, we don't know for the time being. But I'm guessing that it's some kind of magical plague that they've developed. You know, since the establishment of the Royal Pharmacist Association, they've been developing a magical plague that's more powerful than the undead disaster. Now that they're dealing with the Lich King, they naturally have to use it," the dwarf thief said as he stroked the beard on his chin. "Magical plague? Damn it. Prince Regent Bolvar for Dragon seems to be joining forces with the tribes to launch a general attack on the Gate of Heaven's Wrath. We have to send this news over and let him be on guard." Matthias Shore slammed the table and stood up from his chair. But before he could decide who to send, another spy rushed in and shouted breathlessly, "No, not good. Master, latest news. The Forsaken wantonly released a terrifying magical plague in the Battle of the Gate of Heaven's Wrath. All the people who participated in the battle died. King William is furious because of this. He's going to personally lead the Allied forces to the north to completely destroy the Undercity and purify those damned undead. Oh, my God. What shouldn't have happened still happened. This is simply a disaster. Those Forsaken must pay the price." For a while, everyone in MI7 was clamoring to teach these backstabbers a lesson. They didn't know that they had just missed the last chance to save the fate of Azeroth. Chapter 900. There was no doubt that sailing was not an easy task, especially since Azeroth was still in the age of sail. Navigation relied on compasses and compass sextants to determine direction, and it was often possible to deviate from the original route if one was not careful. In addition, there are all kinds of vicious pirates, nagas, murlocs, sea giants, monsters, and so on. They could sink a ship at any time. According to the official statistics of Stormwind City, almost a third of the merchant ships that left the port area would mysteriously disappear midway or sink in some unknown corner. The sea was so cruel, but it also bred unimaginable wealth, which made many people who were willing to take risks go crazy. Although Adam's goal was to go to the whirlpool of the endless sea and throw the crystal into the whirlpool to open a portal for his creator and master to descend and steal the energy and astral soul of the planet's core. However, as the saying goes, if you don't look for trouble, it doesn't mean that trouble won't come looking for you. In less than 3 days after leaving the coastline of the Western Wilderness, he had encountered no less than 4 pirate ships. Among them were the famous Bloodsail pirates, as well as the Blackwater pirates who had sided with the Gnome Financial Group. However, it was apparent that these guys had robbed the wrong person. Not only did they fail to snatch anything valuable from the Dawn, but they were also robbed instead. What was originally one ship had now become a fleet of 5 ships. Along the way, there were a few pirates who thought themselves clever and tried to seize the opportunity to escape. However, they were quickly captured by Adam, who descended from the skies. Those who dared to try and escape were all thrown into the sea to feed the fishes, while the rest were mixed together. The Blackwater pirates and the Bloodsail pirates were mixed together. As long as one party tried to escape, the other party would definitely report it. In addition, when they approached some islands, the fleet was attacked by Nagas a few times. In the end, with his powerful personal strength, Adam forced these guys who hated land creatures to hand over some valuable underwater treasures, and then rewarded the crew to calm the internal panic. When they were about to reach the Broken Isles, almost every sailor's pocket was filled with valuable pearls, gems, and precious metals. Looking at the purple flames where the sea met the sky, George immediately put down the book in his hand and asked in surprise, "Teacher, what is that? Why do I feel an incomparably large amount of arcane energy?" That was the storm formed by the arcane energy gushing out of the Great Vortex. Do you still remember the ancient war I told you about 10,000 years ago? In the past, the High Elves had used the energy of the Well of Eternity to create a glorious magic civilization. But later on, this pure energy attracted the demons of the Burning Legion, which resulted in a terrible war. In the end, the Well of Eternity exploded, tearing apart the only continent left behind, creating the giant maelstrom that we see now. You can think of it as the Great Whirlpool being another form of the Well of Eternity. It's connected to the core of the earth and constantly spewing out energy, you explained expressionlessly. So, for mages, getting close to the Great Whirlpool can not only quickly improve their strength, but also train their control over magic energy, right? George's eyes shone, his tone full of curiosity and excitement. That's right. But at the same time, the Great Whirlpool was extremely dangerous for mages. The closer they were to it, the easier it was for them to be affected. Sometimes, a small fireball could even cause an earth-shattering explosion. Sometimes, a powerful flame burst couldn't even ignite a firewood. How about it? Are you interested in accompanying me to take a look at the Great Whirlpool? Yidang extended the invitation meaningfully. George didn't understand that this was actually a one-way ticket to death. He nodded without hesitation. Of course, it would be my pleasure. Very good. Perhaps your talent in learning magic isn't the best, but your courage is admirable. Yidang patted the young man's shoulder lightly, and then turned to the MI7 agent who was disguised as the first mate. Inform the other 4 ships to dock and set up camp. We will continue to advance towards the Great Whirlpool. What? Are you crazy? The old man opened his mouth in shock. He didn't even realize that his beloved pipe had fallen onto the deck. No, I'm very clear-headed. Don't worry, we don't have to get too close. We can just take a look from afar, Yi Dang ordered in a firm tone. Sigh, all right. You're the captain after all. But even taking a look from afar is an extremely dangerous thing. If we're not careful, the entire ship will be sucked into the great whirlpool. The old man complained as he began to give orders to the other 4 ships through flag signals. He personally steered the ship, and at the same time signaled the sailors to lower the sails by half. They went around the broken beach and headed straight for the great whirlpool. Obviously, the sudden arrival of the 4 ships had attracted the attention of the Alliance and Horde vanguards who had yet to leave the island. Especially the Horde's floating ships, which would fly around the island every once in a while to check for any unusual signs. After all, the scene in the depths of the tomb of Sardras not long ago still left a lot of people with lingering fears. They were afraid that countless demons would rush out from the depths of the tomb and invade Azeroth once again. However, Yi Dang didn't care about this. Instead, he focused all of his attention on the great whirlpool. At this point, there was nothing that could stop him from completing his mission. Even if the ship under his feet sank, as long as he threw out the crystal in his hand, the turbulent currents would naturally sweep it into the depths of the great whirlpool. However, he didn't know why, but the closer he got, the more he felt a throbbing in his heart. It was as if there was something terrifying watching him from the Black Sea. Suddenly, a huge wave appeared on the calm sea and directly lifted the Dawn's ship into the air. Many sailors and crew members panicked and screamed. Some even slipped off the deck and fell into the bottomless sea, sinking in a short while. Damn it! What the hell is going on? Where did that wave come from? A sailor grabbed the rope tightly and shouted loudly. Unfortunately, no one could answer the question he asked. Just as everyone's nerves were stretched taut, an enormous shadow suddenly emerged from the surface of the sea. Then, tentacles that were dozens of times thicker than the ship slowly emerged from the surface of the water. Under the constant stirring of these tentacles, the ship suddenly lost control and sped towards the great whirlpool. At the same time, the sailors on the ship began to hear whispers in their ears. Finally, one by one, they fell into a state of extreme madness. Some pulled out their swords to kill each other, while others knelt on the ground, crying and laughing. Yi Dang saw all of this and soon muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "The ancient god. Enzos? Isn't this guy busy forming the Twilight Council and letting Deathwing start the War of Extinction?" Chapter 901. Fear. Tremble. The world will perish. Kneel, mortals, to the god of nightmares, the demon of thousand feelers. The great Enzos offers your loyalty and soul. Face the desires in your heart. Come, hand over the crystal in your hands, and I can grant you true freedom. As the ancient god muttered in his mind over and over again, Adam's cold face did not change in the slightest, and there was even contempt and disdain in his eyes. When the wooden sailboat under his feet reached the center of the whirlpool, he threw the crystal straight in. In an instant, the crystal emitted a blinding light, and then all the seawater and energy in the surroundings were sucked in, forming a huge spherical vacuum region on the surface of the sea. When Enzo saw this scene, he immediately waved his thousands of tentacles in anger and roared loudly, "Lowly worm, how dare you go against my will? Oomph, you're just a pawn sent out by the distorted void. What right do you have to make me obey your will? Now, bathe in front of Master's incomparably powerful strength and feel your ignorance and insignificance." Adam mocked mercilessly. Just as he was speaking, the crystal finally absorbed enough energy and began to tear apart space to open a passageway that connected the two universes. Then it continued to expand outwards. No, Enzos undoubtedly felt the aura on the other side of the passageway that made him tremble in fear. He swung his tentacles, wanting to destroy the portal. But before he could get close, a huge arm suddenly passed through the portal and grabbed the tentacle, ruthlessly tearing it off the ancient god's massive body. Large amounts of evil and depraved blood splattered everywhere, and any life that came into contact with it, whether it was a human or a fish or shrimp in the sea, would quickly turn into a hideous and terrifying monster. However, to Enzos, who had thousands of tentacles, a single tentacle was obviously far from enough to hurt him. Therefore, the huge arm that had passed through the portal repeated its previous actions over the next few minutes, forcibly pulling out all the hair of the ancient god that was best at hiding. In the end, only a dozen or so tentacles were left, and it had luckily escaped the calamity. As the crystal absorbed more and more energy from the depths of the great whirlpool, the space torn apart by the portal grew larger and larger. Finally, it could accommodate a powerful life form like a titan. Zhang Cheng, who had been waiting for a long time, could not wait to descend. When he passed through the tunnel and appeared above the vortex, all the creatures in Azeroth felt an inexplicable sense of fear, as if the end of the world was coming. Master, according to your request, I have completed my mission. Adam placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. Looking at this special life form that he had created with his own hands, Zhang Cheng nodded with satisfaction. You did well, and you even prepared a small surprise for me. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how this guy found out about your plan. It's okay, you don't have to blame yourself. Ancient gods were tools used to distort the void and corrupt astral souls. They were like viruses and parasites that invaded the human body. Any titan would be able to get rid of them easily. Furthermore, I'm not here to save this planet, so I don't have to worry about the negative effects of killing an ancient god. He blurted out the last word. Zhang Cheng suddenly pounced on Enzos. His entire body turned into an energy storm, directly crushing the unbelievably huge body of Enzos and pulling it out from the depths of the sea bit by bit. There is no doubt that this extremely violent destruction caused great damage to the thousand-feeler demon. As it continued to struggle, a huge amount of thousands of meters was created out of thin air and surged in all directions. In particular, the Broken Islands, which were the closest to it, welcomed the most terrifying tsunami in history. Of course, this was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that as Enzo's body was pulled out bit by bit, the tentacles that reached out from the core of the planet tore apart the seabed's crust. There was a loud boom. The bottom of the great whirlpool, which was already very weak, caused a violent energy explosion. A large amount of energy from the core of the planet spewed out from the cracks, turning the seawater within a radius of dozens of nautical miles into pure liquid energy, just like the well of eternity 10,000 years ago. However, this time, the outflow of energy was not stable. Instead, it was continuous like a flood. A huge crack at the bottom of the sea almost tore the entire Azeroth into two. It was very obvious that Zhang Cheng's actions of tearing Enzos apart had completely triggered the final countdown of the planet's collapse. However, he had no intention of stopping and continued tearing Enzos into pieces. Only then did he look down on this world that was about to be destroyed. He muttered to himself, "Looks like the Titans from the Pantheon were right. Killing an ancient god will indeed cause great damage to the astral souls that have yet to awaken. However, it doesn't matter. After all, after I've sucked out all the energy in astral souls, this planet will be useless." Master, I could sense a few extremely powerful life forms rapidly approaching. Adam's eyes flickered with a strange red light as he loudly reminded, "Oh, I was wondering who it was. It turns out that it's the lingering Dragon King and the meddlesome Medivh. It doesn't matter. I'll temporarily give you a portion of the Titan's power. Play with them for me. After absorbing the power of the astral souls of Azeroth, I'll come back and send them to hell." With that, Zhang Cheng stretched out a finger and gently tapped Adam's forehead. The next second, this artificial life form's reminder was magnified several times. In a short while, it turned into a giant made of mysterious metal. In particular, the energy vibrations caused by his every movement were not something that any ordinary object could compare to. As for Zhang Cheng himself, he directly plunged into the depths of the great whirlpool and began to absorb the huge amount of energy hidden in the core of the planet. He clearly knew that whether it was the Dragon King or the self-proclaimed Final Guardian and Prophet Medivh, they had all sensed the danger and hoped to rush over to buy some time. If he continued to tangle with these guys, it wouldn't be long before the Titans from the Pantheon descended from the sky and forced the entire plan to come to a premature end. Zhang Chun wasn't a fool. He wouldn't be led by his opponents. He only needed to follow the original plan and suck Azeroth dry. No matter what happened next, it didn't matter. Power. Only obtaining great power was the root of everything. When all the enemies added together couldn't do anything to you, all the conflicts and disputes would disappear and be replaced by praise and worship. Chapter 902. Damn it, this is the ancient god Enzos. The red dragon queen Alexstrasza stared at the floating pieces of flesh and blood, as well as the sea creatures that had turned into monsters after touching and devouring the flesh. No, this timeline shouldn't be like this. Someone is interfering with it. The bronze dragon king Nozdormu narrowed his eyes and stared at the shocking energy leakage below the great whirlpool. The kingdom of dreams is collapsing. Our world is about to be destroyed. Who is stealing the power of the astral soul? The green dragon Queen Isra asked loudly as she descended from the sky. It could be said that other than the black dragon king, who had fallen into Deathwing, and the blue dragon king, Malygos, who was not in his right mind, the other three dragon kings felt that Azeroth was facing a huge threat and rushed over immediately. Apart from them, the last guardian Medivh also transformed from a crow into a human form. His face was full of solemnity. It's a titan. He's stealing the astral soul of the world under our feet. We have to work together to stop him, or the world will be destroyed. Then what are we waiting for? Attack! The red dragon queen Alexstrasza took the lead in diving. However, before she could get far, she immediately hit an invisible energy barrier and was bounced back more than 10 meters in the opposite direction. It took her a lot of effort to stabilize herself. Be careful. This is a powerful protective spell. Before defeating the Guardian, no one can pass through, Medivh reminded loudly. As a powerful mage, he could see at a glance that the magic barrier above the great whirlpool could not be destroyed by violence. I can't see through this person's past and future. His fate is not on this planet. My ability is not working. The bronze dragon king, Nozdormu, disappeared for a second and then reappeared. His voice was full of shock and helplessness. Obviously, when he disappeared for a second, he actually went to another time and found that there was no trace of the other party's existence. Looking at this group of hostile dragons and humans, the motionless Adam finally raised his head and said in an emotionless tone, "Without the Master's permission, no one can come close. I'll give you one last chance to leave, or I'll start. Who are you? Who is the Master you mentioned?" Medivh carefully probed. "I am Adam, a servant created by Master himself. As for the Master's name, you don't have the right to know." As he spoke, Adam suddenly raised his head, and two dazzling high-energy rays shot out from his eyes. Medivh couldn't dodge in time and was sent flying. Fortunately, he had the habit of setting up an energy shield in advance. The moment the ray came into contact with his body, the shield was activated instantly, preventing him from being killed instantly. Seeing that his first attack had failed, Adam was in no hurry to launch a new round of attacks, instead patiently waiting for his opponent to counterattack. He understood that time was on his side. The longer he delayed, the more energy his master would absorb and devour. Once the entire astral soul was completely devoured, all the creatures on Azeroth would face a calamity. At that time, it didn't matter if you were the Dragon King or the Last Guardian, you would all be finished. Unless you evolved to be like the Titans and could directly survive in the vacuum of space. The Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and the Green Dragon Queen Isra exchanged a look. Without saying a word, they rushed towards Adam from both sides, and then opened their mouths and breathed out a deadly dragon's breath. Under the double attack of the flame of life and the natural energy, even the air began to burn, emitting a harsh, sizzling sound. Just when they thought that they could cause considerable damage, Adam waved his hand and dispersed the energy around his body. There was not even a trace of his hand on his body. Stupid reptiles! Even the most powerful power you have is given by the Titans. How dare you try to hurt me? Who has the body of Titan? Don't waste your energy. Arcane, nature, holy light, shadow, death, dark energy. I can absorb all the energy. All the energy can be used by me. In the face of absolute power, no matter what you do, it's useless. Stay quiet for a while. Today, you will not only witness the destruction of this world, but also the birth of the strongest Titan. No, you and your master's sinister plan will not succeed. We will stop the destruction of the world. The Bronze Dragon King Nozdormu opened a time rift and began to summon his clones. As the master of time, he could summon all of his clones in different time periods when necessary, forming an invincible Dragon King army. Stop? Just you? Don't you know that time and space are meaningless to the Titans? Adam's eyes showed undisguised contempt, and then he opened his mouth and breathed out a cloud of mist. Instantly, all of Nozdormu's clones that were summoned were forcibly sent back to their original point in time. Friends, I think we must be prepared to sacrifice ourselves this time to fight for a chance of survival for the world. What do you think? The Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza suddenly spread her wings, and her body was shrouded in a crimson flame. Needless to say, she intended to burn her own life force and use her body as a bomb, using the flame of life given by the Titans to deal with Adam, who had temporarily obtained the body of Titan. Of course, it is my honor to be able to fight alongside you. The Green Dragon Queen Isra also began to summon the power of the Emerald Dream. She kept fusing it into her body, and realistic illusions began to appear around her huge body. If Azeroth itself was a physical world, then the Emerald Dream was its twin soul projection, carrying the most beautiful and pure state of the original world, completely undisturbed by the outside world. And once this power was released, the power would be amazing. There was no doubt that the full blow of the two Dragon Kings sacrificing their lives would be enough to hurt Adam, who had temporarily obtained the power of a Titan. So he raised his hands and held up a huge energy shield, intending to withstand the impact and ensure the stability of the protective magic below the whirlpool. However, before the Red Dragon Queen and the Green Dragon Queen could attack, a violent roar came from the bottom of the sea. Then the sea began to roll up and down uncontrollably, finally breaking free from the restraints of gravity and surging into the air. At the same time, the huge crack at the bottom of the sea became bigger and bigger, forcibly splitting Azeroth into two, revealing the astral soul in the depths of the Earth's core. It was so beautiful, so pure, like a baby that had yet to be born. But Zhang Cheng, who had no compassion, directly reached out with his hands and tore into his body bit by bit. No, what have you done? In the deafening roar, the astral souls of the Titans descended from the sky, surrounding him in the center. But Zhang Cheng ignored them and continued to absorb the nutrients of the astral souls of Azeroth, while mocking without turning his head. Ah, the coward has finally shown himself. I was just wondering when you guys, who had been beaten to a pulp by Sargeras, would show up. Why? Do you want to fight me? You want to fight the strongest Titan in history? Chapter 903. No, you don't deserve to be called a Titan. You're just a despicable mortal who stole the power of the Titans. Amanthal, the Supreme Father, roared angrily. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Azeroth's astral soul would be torn apart and swallowed by a stranger while he was not paying attention. Unworthy? Can I understand that this is some kind of inexplicable sense of superiority you have towards your own race? Aren't Titans just a standard to measure the amount of energy a living being has? As long as you reach this standard, no matter who you are, you can be called Titan. Now, I have more energy than all of you combined. Tell me, Supreme Father Amanthal, what do you plan to do? After completely absorbing the astral soul and all the energy, Zhang Cheng had completely transformed into a huge violet Titan, standing tall in the endless universe. Not far behind him was Azeroth, which had been split in half and was entering its final state of collapse. No, the Titans are the creators of order and life. the guardians of the balance of the universe. They are not like you, who killed an unawakened astral soul for selfish reasons. You evil monster, accept the wrath and judgment of life. The only female among the Titans, the guardian of life and order, Yana, rushed forward, releasing a firestorm that symbolized life from her body. Unfortunately, before these flames could get close, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and sucked them clean. Then, he rushed forward with lightning speed and smashed the Titan's condensed form with a punch, firmly imprisoning her in the arcane prison. He sneered and mocked. Wrath? Judgment? Please don't make me laugh. Even your body has been destroyed by Sargeras. What right do you have to be my enemy? Let go. My mother. The king of the sky and raging waves, Gorgoneth, raised a ball of blinding white lightning, trying to defeat the enemy in front of him and save Iana from him. But he had obviously forgotten that Zhang Cheng, who was a spellcaster, was best at controlling energy. The moment the lightning touched the violet metal skin, Zhang Cheng suddenly stretched out a finger and flicked it lightly. Boom! The terrifying lightning was instantly repelled and smashed into Gorgoneth's chest, causing him to disperse back into his astral soul form. After a long time, he was unable to condense his physical body. In the blink of an eye, one Tyran was injured and the other imprisoned. He used the simplest and most direct method to show the entire universe the power of the strongest Titan, a power that made people despair. Just as he had said before, regardless of whether it was magic or technology, it was ultimately a competition of energy levels. Technique might be important, but under the absolute difference in energy levels, there was a 100% chance that one would be crushed to smithereens. As the planet with the most potential currently known in the universe, Azeroth's astral soul was undoubtedly the most powerful. The massive amount of arcane energy it contained was enough to make any living Titan tremble in fear. This was also the reason why the Titan pantheon would rather spend all their effort to imprison the ancient god than cause irreparable damage to the astral soul after discovering it. By the same logic, the Dark Titan Sargeras had invaded again and again to corrupt Azeroth's astral soul and turn it into a fell Titan like itself, or to destroy it directly to prevent the distortion of the void and obtain an invincible void Titan. It could be said that the entire history of Azeroth was a game that revolved around its astral soul and energy. The parties involved were the forces of the void, followed closely by the Titan pantheon, who had made bold and decisive changes to the planet. The last party was Sargeras, who had embarked on a completely different path. As for the heroes, dragons, demigods, demons, and ancient gods that were praised in books, they were just pawns controlled by these three parties. But now, Zhang Cheng had suddenly appeared and snatched the fruits of victory, putting an end to this protracted battle. Feeling the increasingly unstable portal behind him, he knew that he had to say goodbye to this world. Otherwise, it was likely that he would not even be able to return. After all, after seizing the astral souls and energy of the entire Azeroth, he was no longer a Titan baby. Every time he used long-distance teleportation, he would need to expend an astronomical amount of energy. It was impossible for him to achieve this with just the Void Tower. Thinking of this, Zhang Cheng threw Iona, who was imprisoned in the arcane prison, to the Supreme Father, Amanther, and then plunged into the portal that was about to collapse without looking back. He also took Adam, who had returned to his original appearance, with him. As soon as he disappeared, the planet of Azeroth, which had been drained of its last trace of energy, exploded completely, turning into countless dust particles floating in the universe. Except for a few powerful individuals who could survive in the universe, the rest were all dead. Identity, status, money, power, at this moment, all became meaningless. Under the destruction and death, all life was equal. Looking at the millions of souls floating in the universe, Norganon finally could not help but ask, "Great Supreme Father, why did you let that guy leave? He killed our most potential compatriot." The plan that the Pantheon had been planning for tens of thousands of years was completely ruined. "Calm down, Norganon. My heart is now filled with anger and unwillingness like yours. But what can we do? As that guy just said, he is already the most powerful Titan, at least in terms of life level and energy level. Even if we worked together, we would still be no match for him. Instead of destroying the portal, it is better to let him leave our universe. At least our unawakened compatriots are now safe. Amantha explained helplessly. For the Titans, the battle between them was no longer as simple as physical attacks or magic attacks, but a pure competition of energy level. If a Titan's energy level was far higher than the other Titans, he could easily destroy all of his compatriots, just like Sargeras when he slaughtered the Pantheon. Amantha is right. We must preserve our strength and stop Sargeras' ambition. Although the destruction of Azeroth is painful, we still have a more important mission. Let's leave now. I can feel that he will be here soon. After that, Iona broke out of the arcane prison, turned into a ball of light, and returned to the Pantheon. The remaining Titans followed closely behind, disappearing from the wreckage of the collapsed planet. At the same time, the Dark Titan Sargeras did not know that Azeroth had been destroyed and was still traveling in the universe as fast as he could. Every time he passed by some planets with intelligent life, it would cause violent tremors and panic. Even a little leaked evil energy could change and affect a race, making them more and more evil and crazy, and finally set off a tragic war. Chapter 904. Boom! When Zhongcheng's huge body squeezed through the portal, the unstable energy flow instantly released an amazing power. The crack caused the space to collapse in just a few seconds. If it was in the past, he would definitely run away without saying a word. But now he just raised a hand and wiped the place that caused the collapse, and everything returned to normal. That's right. This was the power of the Titans. To be precise, they were a high-dimensional life above the three-dimensional space, completely controlling time and space. If they abandoned their bodies and existed purely in the form of astral souls, the Titans could even completely disappear from the three-dimensional universe. The so-called Titan Pantheon was probably built in the four-dimensional space, so they could appear in every corner of the Azeroth universe anytime and anywhere. As for the so-called Titan technology, it was actually not technology at all. It was just a high-dimensional life form interfering with the low-dimensional world. It was like a person holding a paintbrush and painting on two flat surfaces or making alterations. There was no need for any technology. At most, it could only be regarded as a kind of hand-eye coordination. Phew, this feeling is really pleasant. Zhang Cheng put Adam down and muttered to himself in a low voice. Before he became a Titan, he could not imagine the absolute suppression of low-dimensional life forms by high-dimensional life forms. At the same time, he was secretly glad that he was not arrogant enough to directly awaken the gods who had fallen in a slumber in ancient times. Master, in your current state, I'm afraid you can't return to Earth anymore, right? Adam looked up and asked with admiration. As a participant and executor of the whole plan, he could not suppress the excitement in his heart. Yes. According to my current energy level, there is no way I can easily descend on Earth with my whole body. But it doesn't matter. I can still use the projection of my consciousness. When a stable portal is built, I could descend with my real body. But before that, I have to go to the Pharaon continent and do a little experiment. After saying that, Zhang Cheng gently put his hand into his forehead and slowly pulled out a crystal that emitted a bright light. With the improvement of his life level, this divine artifact that had been fused with his soul for a long time, the broken magic crystal Cleansenian, had also been greatly strengthened. Even if the gods wanted to destroy it, it would not be an easy task. Most importantly, the long period of fusion had given Clint Signon an incredible ability, which was to carry his will, thoughts, and memories. When he couldn't teleport as he wished, it was undoubtedly the smartest choice to send this little toy to another world in his place. Any intelligent life form that came into contact with it would immediately lose their consciousness and thoughts, becoming one of its clones. Adam could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in the broken magic crystal. He held it carefully in his hand and threw it at the portal to the Pharaon continent. Ha! With a muffled sound, the crystal fell precisely into an alley in the slums of the city. A boy who was wearing tattered clothes and looked a little dirty was the first to discover the crystal. He carefully picked it up and hid it close to his body before running away without a trace. He had no idea that this seemingly beautiful thing was actually a death sentence. From the moment he picked it up, his fate was already sealed. Neverwinter, the pearl of the northern region, the dividing line between the barbaric world and the civilized world, the land favored by the god of justice, Tyre, and the front line against the evil city-state, Luskan. However, just like all the cities in the Faron continent, there were rich and poor, commoners and nobles. Obviously, the Beggar's Nest was a place where the poor gathered. Almost everyone who lived in this area did not know what their next meal would be. This was especially true for the countless children who were controlled by the gangs. Every day, they had to rely on begging and stealing to earn 3 simple meals a day. Benny, who was only 13 years old, was one of them. However, today, he felt that he was blessed by fate. He actually saw a beautiful crystal on the street for no reason, so he secretly ran back to the place he called home when no one was looking. Of course, to outsiders, this was at most a hole dug near the sewer. My God, this is so beautiful, and it seems to have some kind of magic power. If I sell it to the mages, how much can I get? 100 gold coins? Or 1,000 gold coins? The boy licked his dry lips, his face full of excitement and anticipation. Just as his gaze was completely attracted, the crystal suddenly vibrated, and then it was inserted into his left eye socket at an extremely fast speed. Before Benny could react, he felt a sharp pain all over his body, and then he completely lost consciousness. When Larry woke up again, he was no longer his original self, but a puppet and doppelganger that was being controlled. This body is so weak. Looks like I have to think of a way to strengthen it. Feeling the extremely poor quality of the boy's body, Zhang Cheng suddenly frowned. His left eye, which was replaced by a broken magic crystal, shone with a strange light. Master, please be careful. You have done a lot of things in this world last time. Once you're discovered by the gods, you may be besieged. Adam's voice came through Clinton Iben. Don't worry. With my current appearance, even if I stand in front of the gods, they won't be able to recognize me. What's more, I'm only here to do a small experiment, not to destroy the world. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly, and then found a rusty dagger from the treasure chest that the boy hid. He squatted by the sewer and rubbed it hard. After confirming that it could be used to kill people, he left the sewer and strode towards a house in the northwest corner of the beggar's lair. According to the boy Benny's memory, this was the headquarters of the gang he belonged to, and there was a half-orc warrior and 2 bandits. Now what Zhang Cheng wanted to do was to kill these 3 fellows and bid farewell to the past life of this body, and at the same time earn his first bucket of gold to prepare for his next plan. After all, no matter how strong his original body was, it was only a projection of his consciousness and could not even strengthen the weak quality of his body. The only advantage was that his mind was loaded with endless magical knowledge. With a little time and money, he could recover a part of his spellcasting ability and even mobilize the amazing power stored in the broken magic crystal to serve the whole plan. Chapter 905. Benny, how much money did you get today? Why are you back so early? As soon as Zhang Cheng entered the room, he saw a skinny man wearing leather armor sitting on a chair and fiddling with a dagger. The man was staring at Zhang Cheng with a gloomy expression. However, Roland ignored the man. Instead, he focused his attention on the half-orc warrior who was drinking wine not far away. He also noticed a female tiefling with red skin, horns on her head, and a tail beside the half-orc warrior. According to the boy's memories, the half-orc, who was the leader and the strongest fighter in the gang, was actually a murderer wanted by the city hall. He was a level 7 warrior. Although he was nothing in Neverwinter, he was definitely a tyrant in Beggar's Lair. Ordinary gangsters were no match for him and could easily be torn to pieces by his heavy and sharp giant axe. Therefore, it did not take long for him to occupy a territory and make a fortune through various criminal activities. The tiefling beside him who seemed to be in a special service industry, was also not an ordinary person. Not only was she skilled in stealth and assassination, she also had some spellcasting abilities. Roland did not know if she was a warlock or a mage, or if she had simply activated a part of her Inferno bloodline. In short, as long as these two people were here, the other gangs in Beggar's Den would not dare to act rashly. "Hey, little brat, I'm talking to you. Are you deaf?" The skinny man was obviously enraged. He stood up abruptly, intending to teach this dirty boy a lesson. However, the moment he lifted his leg, a cold glint flashed across Zhang Cheng's eyes. Then he pounced on him at extremely fast speed, drew out the dagger hidden in his chest, and slid open a wound on the other party's neck. Puff! Scarlet blood instantly splattered everywhere. Huff, huff, huff! The man widened his eyes. He could not believe that the little pickpocket that he usually trampled on would dare to kill him. He desperately tried to cover his bleeding neck with his hands. However, it was obvious that all his efforts were in vain. Because his neck was slit, the most fatal thing was not only the rapid loss of blood, but also the suffocation caused by the blockage of his windpipe. In just a dozen seconds, he struggled and fell to the ground. He took his last breath with an unwilling expression. The pungent smell of blood filled the entire room. Seeing this, the orc warrior's pupils suddenly shrank. He put down the wine glass without saying a word, grabbed the sharp axe beside him, and shouted, "Benny, what are you doing? Do you want to rebel? Revolt? No, idiot. Your brain isn't even as big as a walnut. It's not enough to understand what I'm doing." As Zhang Cheng spoke, he stretched out a finger and caught the thin man's soul. His left eye flickered with an intense light as he slowly devoured the soul and converted it into pure magic energy. "Oh, no, no, no. Be careful. He's not Benny." The tiefling, who had a portion of the devil's bloodline, sensed something and hurriedly retreated several steps as he loudly warned the tiefling. "Who cares who he is? Die, all of you." The half-beastman fully displayed his characteristic of being able to attack without saying anything. He raised his axe and launched an attack. His movements were fast and vicious. This was a technique that he had trained in life and death battles. It was so ugly that it wasn't beautiful at all. Anyone with a bit of experience wouldn't underestimate him. Unfortunately, no matter how fast he swung his axe, he couldn't even catch a corner of Link's clothes. With Adam's long-range calculations and predictions, Zhang Cheng walked the line between life and death again and again. He used a shoddy iron dagger in his hand to create bloody wounds. However, the half-beastman was still a half-beastman. Especially when he was in a berserk state, his adrenaline would surge. He didn't care about pain or injuries at all. He crazily roared, "Ah, you despicable little rat. I'm going to tear you to pieces." "Oomph. Save your energy, idiot. At the rate you're bleeding, you'll go into shock from excessive blood loss in half a minute at most." Zhang Cheng laughed coldly as he taunted the half-beastman. Although the half-beastman's body was so weak that he didn't dare to have any direct contact with the half-beastman, as he would instantly be knocked to the ground, Link appeared to be at ease. He was completely toying with the powerful half-beastman warrior. The tiefling woman's eyes flashed with a strange light. She didn't go up to help, nor did she choose to run away. She merely stood there and observed. No one knew what she was planning. No, nobody can defeat the powerful Okocha. I'll catch you. I'll crush every single bone in your body." The half-beastman warrior furiously shook his head in an attempt to get rid of the weakness and confusion caused by excessive blood loss. However, anyone with even the slightest bit of common sense would know that this wasn't something that could be overcome with willpower alone. Soon, the half-beastman uncontrollably swayed left and right before finally falling to the ground. Pitiful creature, you don't even know who you're fighting against. Link didn't hesitate at all. Zhang Cheng directly bent down and stabbed his dagger into the half-beastman's eye socket. He then pulled out the half-beastman's soul and devoured it, transforming it into magical energy that would transform the half-beastman's weak body. After he finished doing all this, Link finally looked up at the last tiefling and asked in a meaningful tone, "Why didn't you run away?" "Run away? Why would I run away? I'm not your enemy. It's quite the opposite. I think that you'll need a helper to take over Okoch's territory. I promise that I'll serve you just like I served him." The tiefling knelt on one knee and bowed deeply to Link. As a half-demon who was ostracized by human society, her only way to survive was to submit to the strong. As for who this person was, or what evil plans they had, none of that mattered. If the person she was loyal to was no longer in power, then she would simply find a new master. At any rate, nobody would really care about a tiefling woman who wasn't even worth mentioning. In fact, they would even view her as a beautiful and interesting battle trophy or plaything. After meeting two idiots in a row, Link finally met a smart person. Excellent. Excellent. However, there are two types of smart people in the world. The first type really knows how to judge the situation, while the second type likes to think that they're smart. I sincerely hope that you're the first type. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I won't be able to stop myself from peeling off your beautiful, smooth skin and then sprinkling salt water all over your bloody muscles. Trust me, that won't feel good at all. Zhang Cheng then reached out with his nimble right hand and gently stroked the tiefling's beautiful, smooth face. His eyes were filled with an indescribable sense of pressure. Of course, I swear that from today onwards, you're my supreme master. I'm willing to give you my body and soul, the tiefling replied while trembling all over. Through that left eye that was resplendent like a crystal, she could sense a power that was comparable to a god, or even greater than a god. Chapter 906. In the Faerun continent, which was filled with bandits, thieves, monsters, evil gods, dragons, demons, and devils, death was nothing to be surprised about. This was especially so in a place like the Beggar's Nest, which was filled with poverty, chaos, and crime. The deaths of two gang leaders was nothing out of the ordinary. The guards in charge of maintaining order didn't even bother to ask. They allowed the gang members to dispose of the corpses as long as they didn't cause too much of a commotion. Thus, the poor half-orc warrior's head was chopped off and sent to the city hall in exchange for a reward of 300 gold coins. As for the other unlucky bastard and the rest of his corpse, they were thrown into the sewers to feed the rats. Sitting in the cleaned house, Zhang Cheng looked at the nervous beggars, thieves, and thugs in front of him expressionlessly. After a full minute, he asked, "Tell me, how much money can these people hand over every day?" "It depends on the market price, especially the pickpockets. If they are lucky, they can steal hundreds of gold coins. If they are unlucky, they won't even get a single gold coin. But in general, they can at least get 300 to 400 gold coins a month," the tiefling who called himself Jesse quickly answered. Perhaps those who didn't know would think that a 13-year-old child wouldn't know how to manage a gang. However, she had seen the scene of a soul being devoured. She knew very well that the soul in this seemingly weak body was not the soul of a boy. It was a monster with unimaginable power. 300 to 400 gold coins a month? That's too little. Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. Benny, 300 to 400 gold coins is the limit of what we can do. If we ask for more, I'm afraid we will starve to death. A 15-year-old boy couldn't help but beg. Needless to say, he knew the original boy. That was why he mustered up the courage to bargain. If it was the old half-orc warrior, he wouldn't even dare to raise his head. "Shut up. Who are you to interrupt when the boss is talking? If you don't agree, I don't mind teaching you a lesson that will leave a lasting impression." Jesse didn't say anything else. He raised his whip and slashed the boy's body, leaving a bloody mark. The young man couldn't help but let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body trembled violently. It was unknown whether it was due to internal pain or fear. Just as the tiefling was about to lash out a second time, Zhang Cheng suddenly raised his hand and stopped him. "That's enough. Stealing, begging, collecting protection fees. These methods were too low-level. No matter how much they raised the price, they wouldn't be able to make much money. We have to change our way of thinking and jump out of the traditional mafia domain." "You mean?" Jesse's eyes lit up as he carefully probed. "Use the gold coins in our inventory to purchase some materials. I can teach you how to concoct a few potions and sell them to the adventurers, mercenaries, and pirates." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and revealed a meaningful smile. As a master alchemist, he had thousands of recipes in his mind. Most of them required alchemy stones and the power of magic, but there were always a few low-level potions that could be mass-produced without complicated spells. Moreover, strictly speaking, the Pharaon continent was full of magical energy, and there were many special materials that could be used. Understood. Please give me a list, and I will personally purchase them. Jesse didn't waste any time and directly agreed. He didn't even ask why. At the same time, the young man who had been whipped for speaking too much also secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that he wouldn't have to raise the price. In a place like the Beggar's Nest, it was never easy to stay alive. It was a complete joke to talk about how precious life was and how priceless it was. Any gang leader could easily decide the life and death of a person in their own territory. This was also why the residents of the Beggar's Nest would rather submit to the gangs than listen to the self-proclaimed righteous and kind guards and paladins. The reason was simple. The guards and paladins weren't seen every day, but the gang members were rooted here and could be seen almost every day. If someone dared to call the guards and paladins to uphold justice, then after these guys left, the rest of the gang members would collectively take action and kidnap the informant's family. The men would all have their tongues cut off, their eyes dug out, and thrown into the sewers to be eaten by rats. The women had it even worse. Not only would they be raped, but they would also be sold to special service places until they grew old, where they couldn't bear the humiliation and committed suicide. Only then would they be free. Life was so cheap here. Most people were destined to suffer the moment they were born. Feeling the aura of despair emanating from the entire Beggar's Nest, Zhang Chung immediately narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself, "Countless numb souls, struggling souls. This is the ideal testing ground for me. Now, let me see what's the difference between a god and a titan." As soon as he finished speaking, he directly returned to his room on the second floor, closed the door, took a quill, and began to write the names of materials that even the most knowledgeable mage wouldn't know the use of. Jesse, on the other hand, was waving his whip downstairs, loudly threatening the thieves, beggars, and thugs who had been summoned, warning everyone not to have any evil thoughts. Unfortunately, greed and desire always made people lose their rationality and calm. After dispersing, a young man who looked to be in his early 20s sneaked through the dirty alleys and arrived at the broken house on the other side of the Beggar's Nest. As soon as he entered, the one-eyed man sitting on the chair immediately asked, "How was it? Did you find out? Is Okocha dead? Who killed him? Who is in control of the territory in the Northwest?" "Boss Angus, I found out. It was Benny who killed Okocha, and the devil Jesse is helping him take over the territory." The young man quickly gave the answer. "Benny? That little pickpocket. How is this possible?" The one-eyed man, called Angus, stood up abruptly, his face full of disbelief. "I think there's a problem too. But since Okocha is already dead, we can take advantage of this opportunity to launch a surprise attack from both inside and outside. As long as Benny is dead, according to the devil Jesse's personality, he will definitely choose to surrender and not stubbornly resist." The young man suggested excitedly. "Surprise attack? Sounds like a good choice. When do you think is a good time?" Angus is only intact. I was flashing with the flames of ambition. "Tonight will be the best opportunity for us. Don't forget, Benny is only a 13-year-old boy, and he was a pickpocket. Most people don't think he can be a good boss of a guild. You only need to pay a little money, and I can take some people in and let them stay at home obediently at night." "Good. Here are 200 gold coins. Take it and exercise a little. After tonight, I want to be the biggest guild boss in the entire Beggar's Nest." Chapter 907. M01. "Here are 5 gold coins. Promise me, as long as you stay at home tonight, they're yours." "Old friend, I believe that with your keen insight, you must have sensed that a terrible storm is coming tonight. Here are 10 gold coins. Go to the tavern for a drink and find 2 beautiful girls. I promise that tomorrow morning, the whole Beggar's Nest will usher in a new era. Boy, here's a gold coin. Take it and get out of here as far as you can. Don't let me see you tonight, or you know the consequences." Relying on his familiarity with the whole gang, the young man quickly took care of most of the threatening targets before dark. As for the beggars and pickpockets, they were nothing to be afraid of. Even if they did hear something, they would not dare to get involved. In this dark place that could never be illuminated by light, everyone was already used to being selfish. If they found that someone was in danger, there would never be a situation where they would step forward bravely to help. On the contrary, the cruel reality was that they would hide and observe silently, waiting for the perpetrators to leave and see if they could take advantage of them. As night fell, the patrolling guards on the main road quickly returned to the barracks, because even they did not dare to stay in the most dangerous place in the whole of Neverwinter at night. After all, there were too many vicious criminals gathered in the beggar's nest. They didn't care about the laws of the city. As long as there were enough benefits, they would even dare to kill the priests who served the gods. The number of guards who died in the patrol was uncountable. For this reason, the city hall had sent troops more than once to clean up the gang forces entrenched in this place. Unfortunately, every time the army came, the gang leaders would hide in the sewers or simply leave Neverwinter to lie low for a while. When the troops left, they would come back to fight for the territory again. In desperation, the nobles of Neverwinter had reached a secret agreement with the gang leaders in private. That was, no one was allowed to provoke or kill the guards on the street during the day. Otherwise, no matter who did it, they would be arrested and put in prison. In return, no matter what happened in Beggar's Nest after dark, the guards would not interfere. Feeling the restless night air, Jesse took a deep breath and said to Zhang Cheng, who was fiddling with something on the chair, "Something's not right tonight. Almost all of the thugs in the gang have mysteriously left." "Oomph. What does it matter? Anyway, they're just cannon fodder. Even if something really happens, they won't be able to help." Zhang Cheng curled his lips in disdain. "Oh, you know." The tiefling had a look of surprise on his face. "Of course I know. Think about it. If you were the leader of another guild, and you suddenly heard that the most threatening Orko Kocha had died, and the successor was a 13-year-old boy who used to be a pickpocket, wouldn't you think that this is a good opportunity to expand your territory?" Zhang Cheng asked in an emotionless tone. "Since you know, what do you plan to do?" Jesse leaned over the table, his eyes flashing with red light, and his tail was slightly raised, full of exotic charm. It had to be said that she, who had inherited the Inferno bloodline, was not ugly at all. She was quite in line with human aesthetics. No wonder she could survive in such a complicated environment. "I'm waiting for those dirty little rats to come. Do you know? Souls are one of the most unique substances in the world. Not only are they an important magic material, they're also a type of energy. And I just happen to need a lot of souls. Normal snacks can no longer satisfy my appetite. I need more." As he said this, Zhang Cheng's left eye, which had been replaced by a broken magic crystal, released a bright light. Even if Jesse didn't know anything, he could still feel a bone-chilling thirst, a thirst for the soul. Before she could recover from the panic, the closed door behind her was kicked open with a bang. Following that, more than 20 people with various weapons rushed in. The leader was none other than the leader of another guild, Angus, known as the Magic Eye. Of course, the Magic Eye didn't mean that his fake eyeball had any magical power, but it referred to his forbearance and ruthlessness. Looking at this group of vicious scum, Zhang Cheng immediately stood up and opened his arms, cheering loudly. "Ah, tonight's feast is finally here. Welcome. Welcome to the delicious souls you've put in so much effort to deliver. You must know that the taste of hunger is not good. If no one comes tonight, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist coming to your door tomorrow morning. Then I wish you a pleasant meal in advance." Jessie pulled out the dagger and short sword fixed on her thigh and pretended to be playful and winked. "Stop being so pretentious. Benny, we all know who you are, a lowly little pickpocket." The youth who had been busy the whole afternoon was the first to stand up and scold loudly. "Pretentious? You poor fellow, you still don't know who you're making an enemy of, don't you? But it doesn't matter. I don't mind having some dessert before I start the feast." Just as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng suddenly transformed the soul energy he had devoured not long ago into a mind blast and released it towards the crowd. Boom! An energy visible to the naked eye shook the souls of everyone present. In an instant, these people who had been aggressive just a second ago had all turned into wooden dummies. Not to mention moving, he couldn't even blink his eyes. Panic, fear, despair. They finally realized that the 13-year-old boy in front of them, who they had thought to be a pushover, was actually an extremely terrifying spellcaster. In the Faerun continent, anyone who had the ability to cast spells, whether it was a wizard, a warlock, a bard, a priest, or a druid, was not to be trifled with. Often, a simple control spell could make a warrior who prided himself on being strong lose his fighting strength and become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. What a fresh soul. It's 100 times more delicious than the dead ones. Bear with it. It might be more painful later. As Zhang Cheng spoke in a low voice, he stretched out his right index finger and gently pressed it on the youth's forehead. He pulled out a large piece of milky white, silk-like thing. Without asking, it was obvious that these white silks were a part of the soul. No one could withstand the intense pain of the soul being torn apart. The poor youth even broke free from the paralysis caused by the mind blast and opened his mouth wide to let out a blood-curdling scream. Eyes, nose, ears, mouth, all these organs were oozing black blood. Chapter 908. Phew, this feels great. Just as the residents around the house were frightened out of their wits by the agonizing screams, Zhang Cheng finally sucked out another person's soul. The light from the broken magic crystal in his left eye became brighter and brighter. Needless to say, those unlucky people who had completely turned into walking corpses had lost their precious souls. At the same time, he had finally completed a life transformation. From an ordinary boy with no talent, he had become a low-level wizard who could learn and master magic. In fact, for Zhang Cheng, who had become a titan, even if it was just a projection of his consciousness, as long as he could control his body to the minimum requirements, it was as easy as eating and drinking for him to touch the weave. After all, he would not take the wrong path. Whether it was knowledge or skills, they were all firmly imprinted in his mind. No, 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 don't come here. Don't come here. I was wrong. I shouldn't have come to find trouble with you. I beg you, let me go. I'm willing to hand over my territory. I'll give you all the money I've saved over the years. Seeing the souls in his hands being devoured one by one, the magic eye, Angus, finally broke down. He cried and screamed loudly as he begged. Of course, this was not because he had become timid, but because the way his soul was being devoured was too frightening. It was enough to make most of the die-hard people in this world feel fear. In Faerun, the most important thing for a person was not their life, but their soul. As long as the soul existed, even if they died, they could go to the kingdom of the god they believed in and live a happy life. Therefore, death was not scary. What was scary was the soul being imprisoned, devoured, tortured, or nailed to the wall of the faithless, slowly enduring the erosion of time. Did you see that? This guy actually wants me to let him go. Zhang Cheng's young face showed undisguised mockery. Although the body he was controlling now was that of a 13-year-old boy with a malnourished body, it gave people an indescribable feeling. Fear? Depression? Madness? Even Jesse wasn't sure why he would willingly submit to the other party, but he still forced out a smile and replied, I suggest you kill him quickly. As long as he's dead, we'll be able to control nearly a third of the territory in Beggar's Nest. This was especially true for the business of stealing funerary goods and selling fresh corpses in the great necropolis. In addition, I also heard that he has a very beautiful mistress and woman. You could take your time to enjoy them. Don't touch my daughter. He didn't know if it was because the effects of Spirit Blast had passed, or if it was because his love for his daughter trumped everything else. In short, Angus suddenly regained his ability to move. He pulled out his machete and wanted to slash the demon that was close to him. Yes, in his eyes, Zhang Cheng could already be equated with the notorious devil of the bottomless abyss. But before the sharp scimitar could land, Jesse rushed forward in a flash and used the dagger to pierce the opponent's wrist, then fixed it on the wooden wall behind him. Bang! With a muffled sound, a large amount of blood flowed out of the wound. Let me go. Let me go. If there's anything, come at me. Don't touch my daughter. Angus struggled like a madman. His only intact eye was bloodshot. If it had been someone else, they might have chosen to let him go on account of his sincere feelings for his daughter. At the very least, they would have spared his mistress and daughter. But who was Zhang Cheng? A lunatic who completely embraced darkness in his heart. He sneered and said, "Aha, come and listen. A gang leader who commits all kinds of evil actually has a kind side, willing to sacrifice everything for his beloved daughter. What a great and noble sentiment. But I have a small question. When you were raping those innocent girls, rewarding them to your subordinates for their wanton lust, and finally selling them off, did you ever think that they were as innocent as your daughter? When you were killing people, did you ever think that they also had wives and daughters? So don't say these words that make me feel disgusted and nauseous. Since you have chosen the path of darkness, you have to be prepared to endure loneliness and loneliness. You have to make your heart as cold and ruthless as the winter in December. If you can't do it, then you are a failure and deserve to taste pain. I curse you, Benny. One day, you will end up in a worse state than me." Angus was not a fool. He immediately realized that the other party did not intend to let him go, nor would he let his mistress and daughter go. He used all his strength to roar loudly. In this world that was filled with magical power, any strong obsession could be transformed into a real curse, and even affect the illusory fate. Curse? Ha ha! Sorry, I really can't help but want to laugh. You can't even keep your soul, and you still hope to curse me? Forget it, seeing that you are about to contribute a precious soul that is intertwined with good and evil. I will benevolently grant you eternal death. Farewell, Angus. Thank you for sending me such a sumptuous meal." With the last word, Zhang Cheng finally pulled out the soul of this man who was full of hatred and unwillingness and swallowed it alive. A blood-red magic tattoo slowly extended from his left eye socket. Looking at his former competitor who had fallen to the ground with lifeless eyes, Jesse's face revealed an extremely complicated expression. He quickly and carefully probed. What do you plan to do next? Launch a counterattack and swallow up Angus's territory? Of course, but I don't need to attack. I only need to receive. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng pressed his hand against his left eye and slowly pulled out a constantly pulsing crystal. The next second, the soulless walking corpses on the ground were instantly infused with a trace of energy, and they started crawling up from the ground. Although their eyes were lifeless, and they didn't seem to be alive at all, their movements weren't affected at all. Their every action was perfectly coordinated. Zhang Cheng directly stuffed the crystal into the tiefling's hand. Here, take it. These people are now under your control. Remember, kill all those who are still stubbornly resisting before the sun rises. From tomorrow onwards, I will be the supreme ruler of the beggar's nest. Understood. I won't disappoint you. Jesse reflexively licked his lips as he sensed the powerful magical energy transmitted from the crystal. His eyes revealed an intense infatuation. As a half-devil with a bloodline from the lower planes, she was unable to resist the temptation of the crystal's soul and magical energy. She quickly disappeared into the night with these cannon fodder. Those drunken gang leaders had yet to realize that tonight they were about to welcome an incomparably cruel and bloody night. Nobody would be able to escape. Nobody would be able to escape. When the sun rose once more, the beggar's nest would welcome a new chapter, an era where chaos would end and order would be ushered in. Chapter 909. Hey, buddy, have you heard? There was a riot in Beggar's Lair. Almost all the gang leaders were caught in one fell swoop. Even the city guards were alerted. What? Really? Who did it? It's said to be a 13-year-old boy named Benny. God of justice above. A 13-year-old boy became the ruler of Beggar's Nest? Is there something wrong with my ears? Chill. You'd better watch your tone. You should know that he killed over 100 people in a single night. He's as cold and heartless as a monster. That's right. And since Benny took over, his gang started to produce some potions that have never been heard of before. Many nobles and merchants are scrambling for them. In the most luxurious inn in Neverwinter, Moonstone Mask, many guests were discussing the crazy night that had happened not long ago. Neither the nominal ruler of this city, Lord Nasser, nor the 9 guards of Neverwinter who were loyal to him had expected such a situation. When they wanted to talk to the underground king of Beggar's Nest, they did not know where to find him. No one knew that after establishing an effective control system, Zhang Cheng had quietly moved out of Beggar's Nest and bought a house in the harbor area. He had used a more hidden method to ensure that no one could easily find him. There was no doubt that he had taken advantage of people's common mistakes. After all, in the past, almost all of the gang leaders would place their headquarters in Beggar's Den and use the large number of poor people and the complicated sewers to hide. Therefore, most people would mistakenly focus on Beggar's Den and not the other districts. Standing on the balcony on the 2nd floor of the new house, Jesse looked down at the busy sailors and coolies. He asked without turning his head, "This is your plan? To cross the sea and disappear from everyone's sight?" "That's right. I'm not those stupid idiots who like to show off in front of the weak and make others fear them by venting violence. A real gang should be like a shadow hiding in the dark. Everyone knows of its existence, but they can't find where it is. If anyone dares to betray, the shadow will quietly take action and execute the informant. We should take advantage of people's fear of the unknown, not bloody and cruel violence." Zhang Cheng sat on the sofa and answered casually, "That sounds reasonable. Where did you learn all this?" Jessie walked back into the house with light steps. She picked up a bottle of good rum from the cabinet and poured herself a glass. "Books are the carrier of knowledge. As long as you're smart and patient enough, you can find the answers to almost all questions in them." After saying this, Zhang Cheng threw the parchment scroll he had just finished reading to the side. Obviously, the paper was not about anything else but the recent profits of Beggar's Nest. Thanks to the formula he provided, the profits for buying potions had reached 10,000 gold coins in just 2 short weeks. If it weren't for the lack of raw materials, they could have continued to expand. Reading. Jesse rolled his eyes in annoyance. "Please spare me. Once I read too many words, I start to feel sleepy. At most, I'll fall asleep in a few minutes. By the way, recently there's a mage called Mandon who's been asking around for your whereabouts." "Mandon?" Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. "Yes, it said that he lives in the Black Lake district and has a rather luxurious manor. He's the kind of bastard who's filthy rich but never gives alms to the poor," Jesse said without thinking. Zhang Cheng patiently listened to the content, and the corner of his mouth immediately curled up. "Interesting. Send a message for me. Tell him that tomorrow night at 10 o'clock, I'll be waiting for him at the seedy tavern in the docks. Also, don't forget to maintain order. No matter who dares to break the rules I set, cut off his head and hang it at the highest place in Beggar's Nest. Don't worry. Those pitiful creatures have been scared out of their wits by you. They won't dare to do anything out of line. But I don't understand. Why are you targeting the temple of the God of Justice? You have to know that those priests and paladins are not easy to deal with." Jesse finished the wine in the glass in one gulp and burped. "If you want to completely control Beggar's Nest, you have to first extinguish the hope of those poor people and make everyone realize that no one or God can help them. Unfortunately, the existence of that temple is equivalent to the last light in the darkness, so we have to destroy it. All right, go about your business. If there's nothing important, it's best not to look for me at the docks." Zhang Cheng waved his hand, indicating that the tiefling could leave. "Understood." Jessie didn't say anything else. She directly put on her hood and gently pushed the bookshelf on the wall aside. She crawled into a tunnel that had been dug beforehand and entered the complicated sewers. Not long after, she crawled out from the corner of a house in the Black Lake district and ran in the direction of Mandon Manor. 2.5 hours later, an unsigned note was finally delivered to the mage through the guards and the butler. The guard said that this was sent by a person covered in a cloak. Judging from the figure, it should be a woman, the old butler explained politely. "I know who she is, and I know who she's working for." Mandon narrowed his eyes and released a ball of flame to burn the note. The old butler seemed to have noticed something and asked carefully, "Sir, that child called Benny, could he really be your—" "Shut up. This isn't something you should be involved in." Before the butler could finish speaking, Mandan immediately reprimanded him loudly with an angry and ashamed expression on his face. "As you wish." The old butler hurriedly bent down and bowed. "But I have to remind you that so far, you don't have an heir who can inherit the family business, so an illegitimate child is actually a good choice. At least Master Benny has proven his talent, hasn't he?" I said, "Shut up. You don't have to worry about my affairs. As for Benny, I want to meet him personally before I make a decision. You have to understand that his mother is just a lowly commoner, and she ran away with another man behind my back. I'm not even sure if that child is mine." Mandan was obviously a little grumpy today. He kicked over the vase in the corner and went straight to his bedroom. When the old butler saw this scene, he couldn't help but sigh softly. He squatted down and picked up the pieces scattered on the ground while muttering to himself, "Great God of aristocracy, please protect Master Benny and don't let him wander outside. Otherwise, the family may die because there is no heir." Chapter 9-10. A day passed in the blink of an eye. The city tavern in the dock area once again welcomed countless sailors who were drinking and some who looked very cautious. As the headquarters of the largest smugglers' alliance in Neverwinter, it was not just a place for pleasure, but also a secret trading place. Anyone who wanted to avoid high taxes and buy cheap goods would gather here. Every once in a while, there would even be an auction where people would bid for rare magic weapons, equipment, and potions with a token called the smuggler's coin. It could be said that the city tavern was like a parasite lying on the economic artery of Neverwinter. The more it sucked, the less tax the city would pay. But all this had nothing to do with Mandamin. He came here today just to meet a person, a boy who gave him a headache. The loyal half-orc guard, Gromin, followed closely behind, using extremely fierce eyes to force away the bastards who wanted to take advantage of him. Just like that, the two of them walked around the entire tavern, one in front and one behind. Finally, they found a relatively short figure in an inconspicuous corner. Due to the dim light, Mandamin could not see his face clearly, but he still took the initiative to approach him and asked in an uncertain tone, "Are you Benny?" "Yes. Nice to meet you, Your Excellency." Zhang Cheng took the initiative to take off his hood, revealing a young face. "What happened to your eye?" Mandamin frowned subconsciously. "Why do you ask?" Zhang Cheng gently tapped the blindfold on his left eye and answered with a smile, "I met with a small accident and lost an eye. Why don't you go to the temple and ask the priest to cure it for you? With the wealth you have now, you can't even afford such a small amount of money. Can you?" Mandamin said as he sat on the opposite side of the table, constantly looking up and down with a scrutinizing gaze. Although he had mentally prepared himself before coming, he could not help but feel a strong aura, as if the person sitting in front of him was not a 13-year-old boy, but a smart, cunning, and dangerous person. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "Why must it be cured? What is lost is lost. It can make me remember my mistakes and remind me not to repeat them. Isn't it worth being happy to receive such a huge reward just by giving up an eye? You're smart and precocious. You're even more outstanding than I imagined. But before we start our conversation today, I hope we can do a magic test to prove our blood relationship." Mandan had a complicated look on his face as he took the initiative to make his first request, because he understood that if he couldn't confirm that the other party was really selfish, then the following conversation wouldn't be valid. "Sure." Zhang Qing nodded and agreed. Without a doubt, he knew who the mage sitting in front of him was. At the same time, based on the boy's remaining memories, he deduced that the mage was most likely the boy's biological father. Mandan, who had always been selfish, obviously did not care about other people's feelings. He took out a white crystal, cut his finger with a dagger, dripped a drop of blood on it, and pushed it to Zhang Cheng. "Here, you're also the first drop of blood. Don't think that this is some ancient blood test. It's the exact opposite. This is a complicated magic device that can tell if two parties are related by blood. It's often used by nobles to check if their children are their own. After all, the culture of Faron continent was so open. The goddess of love, Shuna, was even more shameless. She encouraged men and women to let go of their natural instincts and not be bound by marriage. Therefore, it had become a popular trend for nobles to have affairs, keep mistresses, and visit brothels. Women, on the other hand, were not to be outdone. They kept gigolos, had intimate relationships with their bodyguards, and occasionally had passionate love games with young, handsome artists and bards. In short, there was nothing they didn't dare to do. With such a promiscuous private life, it was naturally a problem to confirm if the offspring were their own. Therefore, just like how modern society was becoming more open about sex, causing genetic paternity tests to become more popular, Pharaon continent also had magic to identify blood relatives. As the saying goes, where there's a demand, there's a market. The corresponding products and technology would also emerge. There was no hesitation. Zhang Cheng cut his finger and dripped a drop of blood on the surface of the crystal. Instantly, the crystal released a dazzling light. Then, the 2 drops of blood slowly seeped into the crystal and finally merged into one, forming a piece of dark red crystal. Seeing this, Mandan heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, an embarrassed look appeared on his face. After a few minutes, he finally said, "I believe you've seen the result. Yes, I'm your father, at least in terms of blood relations." "So, dear father?" Zhang Cheng asked with a half-smile. In order to express his disdain, he even emphasized the word father, making the whole sentence sound very harsh. If it was any other time, Mandan would have turned around and left without hesitation. As a man who was a playboy when he was young, he had played with countless women. The number of illegitimate children was probably not small, so he never cared about these things. According to the traditional concept of the Pharaon continent, illegitimate children were not even considered a member of the family. Most illegitimate children were either abandoned or raised until they reached adulthood and went out to make a living. The best was to stay at home and become servants or housekeepers to serve their superior brothers and sisters. However, the problem was that Zhang Cheng's current performance was still better than the sum of all the other illegitimate children added together. He had become a force to be reckoned with in Neverwinter. In addition, Mandan was not young anymore. He really did need an heir in case. Therefore, after forcibly suppressing the displeasure in his heart, he gently tapped the table with his right index finger and explained in a low voice, "I understand. You have resentment in your heart. You resent me for abandoning you. But you don't know that it wasn't me who abandoned you. It was your mother who eloped with another man behind my back. She was the one who abandoned you in the beggar's nest." "Resentment? No. I don't mean to resent you. Let's put these old things aside first. Tell me what you want from me, and how much are you willing to pay? I need you and the beggar's nest under your control. In return, you'll be my only heir." Chapter 9:11. Why would Mande Min want to control the beggar's nest? The answer was simple. He needed corpses, lots and lots of corpses, to conduct research and experiments on necromancy magic. As a typical selfish mage in the evil camp, he had a very ambitious goal, which was to transform himself into a lich and obtain eternal life. Although it was no secret that high-level spellcasters could transform into liches in the Pharaon continent, the problem was that Neverwinter was under the influence of the god of justice. Obviously, it was impossible for them to have such knowledge, so they could only do experiments secretly. If they could build a secret laboratory in the beggar's nest, then the huge amount of negative energy would be inexhaustible. After figuring this out, Zhang Cheng immediately reached an agreement with Mande Min. One would be responsible for building the secret laboratory and ensuring its safety, while the other would provide inheritance rights, making him an official member of a noble family, and use it as a springboard to enter the upper class. The relationship between the two was not so much that of father and son, but rather of mutual use. Blood relations were only the premise of the deal, and the real bond that maintained the relationship was interests. Otherwise, why would Mande Min choose Benny, the underground king of the beggar's nest, when he had so many mistresses and illegitimate children? Of course, neither of them would admit this, and on the surface, they still played their respective roles. In just 2 weeks, Mande Min had brought Zhang Cheng to 4 banquets and introduced him to the upper class of Neverwinter openly. He even got to know the right-hand man of Lord Nather, the famous paladin, Erebes the Timerland. Unfortunately, the magic plague in Neverwinter had not yet broken out, So the female paladin still maintained her glorious image and did not fall into darkness, showing the other side of her soul. Compared to the seemingly flawless bright side, Zhang Cheng undoubtedly preferred her to fall into darkness and be dominated by anger and resentment. He really wanted to know what kind of reaction the God of Justice would have when he saw the sacred warrior that he had personally reformed picking up a sword and slaughtering his own followers. Would he be furious? Would he ignore her? Or was he planning to show his magnanimity and give her a chance to redeem herself? No matter which one it was, he had the confidence to make the God of Justice suffer a great loss. Good evening, Miss Timeland. You're as beautiful as ever tonight. Zhang Cheng bent down and kissed the back of the paladin's hand. Thank you for the compliment, Benny. Iris smiled and returned the salute. It had to be said that age was sometimes a perfect cover. If it was any other adult male, she would never allow them to be too intimate with her, but if it was a 13-year-old boy, then there was no need to be too worried. In fact, as a paladin who defended order and kindness, she didn't like such extravagant and depraved social occasions at all. But in order to ensure Lord Nasser's safety, she had no choice but to participate in them again and again. As a result, many lecherous men treated her as their target. Seeing that Arebs didn't seem to want to talk to him, Zhang Cheng immediately retreated to the side and silently observed the visitors, especially the few priests around Lord Sill. This was especially true for a priest from Heim called Dessel, who gave off an extremely uncomfortable feeling. Looking at these actors who were already in place, he couldn't help but let out a sigh. With a voice that only he could hear, he murmured to himself, I really hope that when the magic plague comes, you can give the gods an unforgettable performance. And I can also get the results of the experiment that I want. As soon as he finished speaking, Mandon hurriedly walked over from not far away and asked with a frown, You seem to be a little close to that half-elf named Irebs recently. What's wrong? Does this bother you, father? Zhang Cheng asked with a faint smile. She's a paladin of the God of Justice. She's not on the same side as us. Mandon reminded in a serious tone. I don't think so. Haven't you heard of it? The brighter a person appears, the darker his heart is. I'm looking forward to the day when Miss Timeland falls into darkness. When that time comes, she will be my best helper, Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully. Oh, are you sure? Mandon turned around and glanced at Arebs, who was talking to her fiancé. Of course. She will belong to me, whether in soul or body. Zhang Cheng's tone revealed a strong sense of confidence. All right, since you're so confident, there's no harm in trying. One thing I have to admit is that you're smarter and braver than I was when I was young. At least, I've never thought of conquering a paladin who serves the God of Justice. The corner of Mandon's mouth lifted slightly, and a playful smile appeared on his face. Needless to say, he mistakenly thought that Zhang Cheng's action of getting close to Arebs was a normal reaction of an adolescent boy who had a strong desire for a beautiful woman. Zhang Cheng smiled indifferently and didn't try to explain anything. While the guests were talking, Mandon quickly lowered his voice and asked, When will the laboratory I asked you to build in the depths of the cemetery be completed? A week at the latest. You should be able to use it. Zhang Cheng gave a specific number without hesitation. After all, this wasn't a graveyard that was filled with undead monsters and cultists after the outbreak of the magical plague. Not only were there gravekeepers, but there were also guards patrolling the area. Hence, they couldn't act recklessly. They had to be stealthy. All right, I'll give you some related experimental equipment in 2 days. Help me transport it directly. Mandon was obviously a little dissatisfied with the speed, but he didn't complain. One had to know that a week in Farron Continent was not 7 days, but 10. There were only 3 weeks in a month, so the progress of the entire project was not considered efficient. Be patient, dear father. As a mage, the biggest enemy is impatience. Magic research has always been a dangerous thing. The more impatient you are, the easier it is to make mistakes. You know magic too? Yes. In fact, after this period of learning, I'm already a mage who has mastered level 2 spells. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. Snap! Instantly, a silver snake flashing with electric light appeared out of thin air. Not only did it shuttle between the 5 fingers, but it didn't hurt a single hair. When Mandan saw this, his pupils suddenly shrank. It was as if someone had cast a spell on him, and he couldn't recover for a long time. Chapter 9:12. There was no doubt that Zhang Cheng's spellcasting ability had shocked Mandarin quite a bit. After all, in Mandarin's impression, this bastard had only started to learn magic after he had accepted him. It had not been more than 2 weeks. What an amazing speed to go from an ordinary person to a mage who had mastered a second circle spell in 2 weeks. Not to mention the apprentices in Neverwinter Academy, who were crowned as geniuses, even in the entire Faerun continent. He was one of the most talented apprentices. One had to know that learning magic had never depended on hard work, but on innate talent. Without enough talent, no matter how hard you worked, you would only be a low-level mage for the rest of your life. You would never be able to understand the extremely complicated theoretical knowledge of high-level magic. The most classic example was the last Grand Arcanist of the Nazrils, Karthus. He had cast his first cantrip when he was 2 years old, and later, he learned magic very quickly. He became a Grand Arcanist at the age of 22, standing at the peak of his time. In the end, he invented the unprecedented level, 12 magic, and almost replaced the first generation of the Goddess of Magic. Therefore, Mandarin had enough reason to believe that his chosen successor was also a magic genius. He began to spend a lot of effort to cultivate and teach him. Zhang Cheng did not disappoint his nominal father. With the endless knowledge in his mind, he reached the level of 4th Circle Arcana in only 2.5 months. At this time, Mandarin, who was a level 8 mage, no longer had the ability to continue teaching. He could only go to the laboratory under the graveyard alone with extremely complicated emotions. There was envy, jealousy, and a little relief. He began to madly research the method to transform himself into a lich. Since he had disappeared for a few months, the power of the manor gradually passed to Zhang Cheng, the only successor. Young Master Benny, this is the income and expenditure for the past 2 months. Please take a look. The old butler respectfully handed over a parchment scroll full of accounts with both hands. 35,000 gold coins came into our account this month. Zhang Cheng glanced at the amount and immediately revealed a surprised expression. Of course, the people I've arranged for have already mastered the sugar production method you provided before. They can produce at least 5 tons of syrup every month. If it weren't for the fear that the key technology would be exposed if we expand the production scale, our income would be several times higher. The old butler explained with a smile. After hearing this, Zhang Cheng nodded thoughtfully. That's right. Just maintain the current scale. Don't leak any information. Obviously, what he showed was not some advanced technology. It was just a simple method to make malt syrup. Sugar and honey, which could provide sweetness to food, had always been luxuries in the Faerun continent, especially in the northern region where the climate was relatively cold. Compared to using sugar cane or sugar beets to extract white sugar, the method of making maltose was relatively simple. All one needed to do was to germinate the wheat and boil it together with some crops that were rich in starch, such as glutinous rice, to produce a brown, sticky syrup that could be added to bread and snacks or eaten directly. Most importantly, he didn't have to work hard to make any complicated machinery, nor did he have to train workers. It was simply the best choice to make a fortune. Understood? Please don't worry. I'll do my best to protect the secret of the workshop from outsiders. The old butler hurriedly bowed. As the profits from the malt syrup increased, he was extremely satisfied with the only heir of the family. He couldn't wait to remove the flirtatious Mandan from the position of the head of the family as soon as possible. Of course, this was only a thought in his mind. He didn't dare to put it into action. No matter what, Mandan was a noble mage. It would be as easy for him to kill someone when he was angry. As usual, transfer 10,000 gold coins to the beggar's lair and give it to Jessie. She's now fighting with the god of Justice's temple for control and needs some financial assistance. Zhang Cheng tossed the parchment scroll aside and instructed straightforwardly. Understood. I'll send someone to send the money over tomorrow. But I don't understand. Why do you care so much about the beggar's lair? The old butler didn't have any objections. He just raised a question. Zhang Cheng smiled and replied, because whoever completely controls the beggar's lair will control 1/3 of Neverwinter's population. It's equivalent to a city within a city. Its political and military significance can't be bought with money. Then, with the beggar's lair as a base, we can slowly expand our power to the port area, the Black Lake area, and the Peninsula area. Think about it. If more than 3/4 of this city's land and population are under my control, then how long can Lord Nasser remain in his position? I see. I think I understand your plan. Compared to the old master, you're obviously more ambitious and bold. I promise, I won't mention this to anyone. After that, the old butler placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. He turned around and left the room, disappearing at the end of the dim corridor. At the same time, in front of the main hall of the God of Justice in the beggar's lair, a large group of poor people in ragged clothes were waving sticks and stones. They kept cursing loudly, and from time to time, they would throw the stones in their hands and spit at the steps of the temple. If it was before the time of troubles, such serious blasphemy might have attracted the dissent of the incarnations of the gods, and then it would directly lead to a massacre. Don't think that the gods in the good camp are weak and can be bullied. On the contrary, the kindness they advocated was not blindly indulgence and tolerance, but iron and blood justice. However, after the time of troubles, the gods finally realized that the unparalleled power of His Majesty Io, the God of gods, was not something they could contend with. They were all knocked down to the mortal world and walked around as saints. Many gods lost their lives because of this, so no one dared to rashly descend into the material world. Fortunately, this siege didn't last too long. When the sun was about to set, the protesters retreated into the dark alleys. No one noticed that in every alley, there were people giving out silver coins to these people. Yes, they didn't gather to make trouble for no reason. They were organized. They were making trouble with a purpose. As one of the masterminds behind the scenes, Jessie was hiding in a nearby house. She admired the shocked and angry expressions of the priests and paladins of the God of Justice in the temple through the gap in the window. Finally, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. As she laughed, she didn't forget to mock. Ha 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 ha. These are the servants of the great God of Justice? How ridiculous. A group of poor people made them so embarrassed. I think it won't be long before these guys can't take it anymore and take the initiative to leave the beggar's lair. You're right. But the problem is, why should we give money to those poor people? Can't we just force them to do so? Chapter 9:13. The temple was the sanctuary of the gods in the material world. It was a place where the gods' thoughts and ideals were preached. It was also a gathering place for believers to pray and donate. It represented the supreme authority of the gods. Generally speaking, unless it was a follower of demons, or some evil monsters, it was rare for anyone to besiege a temple on the Faran continent. In particular, the nominal ruler of Neverwinter, Lord Nasser, was a follower of the God of Justice. The mainstream belief of the whole city was Tyre, the God of Justice. His influence had penetrated all aspects of the ruling structure. Many bureaucrats and soldiers were priests and paladins of the God of Justice. Therefore, the priest in the Temple of Beggar's Nest had never figured out what he had done wrong to cause such great public anger. Looking at the mess below the steps of the temple, he could not help but sigh slightly. He said to the senior priest who came to investigate the situation, "Did you see that? These damn poor people have been bewitched. They've been besieging the temple for half a month. Not to mention converting believers. Even those who came to listen to the teachings have disappeared. They just stood outside and never rushed in." The senior priest frowned subconsciously. Because of this strange situation, he could not help but think of some conspiracy. Yes, no one rushed in. But the problem is that they've cut off the temple's water and food sources. No one in Beggar's Nest is willing to provide us with food and drink, so we can't even clean the temple now. The young priest's face was full of sorrow. But it was no wonder. He had thought that spreading the teachings in Beggar's Nest was an easy job that could accumulate experience. Most of the poor people could not even read. Coupled with the natural fear of the gods, he could easily gain a large number of believers. However, the tragic reality shattered this laughable idea. Now, not to mention the believers, the entire temple could not even be maintained. Sai, it's not your fault, child. Let's go back first. I think this matter is not so simple. Maybe we should ask Arabes de Timarand to send someone to investigate in person. The senior priest was obviously more rational. He did not mean to blame the junior, nor did he fly into a rage. Thank you very much for your understanding. Please wait a moment, I need to pack my things. With the news that the poor people in Beggar's Nest had besieged the temple of the God of Justice, the higher-ups of Neverwinter finally realized the seriousness of the problem. They hurriedly sent people to investigate and even hired some daring adventurers. But who would have thought that this place, which was originally just a gathering place for the poor, had now become an impregnable fortress? Before they could find out anything, they were kicked out by Jesse's group. The unknown adventurer teams didn't even have a chance to get out alive. Their bodies were thrown into the sewers and eaten by the rats. By forming a community of interests, Zhang Cheng had turned this place into his own kingdom. Those who were willing to cooperate could at least receive free food every day, but those who did not cooperate would have their entire family vanish from the face of the earth. No one knew whether these people were killed or sold to slave traders. Just when Lord Nather was furious and wanted to send a large number of guards to clean up the Beggar's Nest, a terrible plague suddenly broke out in Neverwinter. In just a few weeks, the plague spread to every corner of the city. Hundreds of patients crowded the Temple of Tyre, which was located in the center of the city. For a moment, the people fell into a panic. The price of various drugs skyrocketed, especially after the city council ordered the city gates to be closed and the circulation between the various regions was isolated. Even the price of food was out of control. The famous Neverwinter Academy had to be temporarily closed. It was as if the once prosperous pearl of the northern region had become a place of chaos overnight. Under the threat of death, the dark side of human nature was unleashed to the maximum. All kinds of vicious crimes were committed one after another. In the end, there were so many criminals that the prison could not hold them all. Feeling the panic and despair of the entire city, Zhang Cheng could not help but smile slightly. He said to Jesse, who was standing in front of him, "It's time to enter the next stage. Tell all the residents of Beggar's Nest that in the beginning, whoever is willing to offer their faith will be able to receive food and medicine that can resist the plague." Faith? Are you planning to become a god? The tiefling was shocked. His pupils suddenly shrank. Become a god? No, I just want to do an experiment about faith in gods. Remember, make them kneel and pray to the god statue. If someone's body emits a red light, it means that he's a liar. For such people, just kill them as a warning to the rest. Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a deep light. Apart from himself, no one in this world could understand the great meaning behind this experiment. Even the gods could not. Understood. I'll take care of it. Jessie bowed deeply to the drug man. There was no doubt that such a gaze made her feel terrified. She felt as if she was an ant being stared at by a dragon. Relax, don't be so nervous. I promise that when the plague is over, you'll replace me as the underground queen of Beggar's Nest. With that, Zhang Cheng reached out his right hand and gently stroked her smooth cheek. After months of careful preparation, he had finally revealed his sharp fangs. He intended to use this plague to complete his experiment. Since Beggar's Nest no longer had a temple for the God of Justice, he did not have to worry about being discovered by the outside world. After all of Neverwinter's attention was focused on treating the sick and preventing the plague from spreading. Who would have the energy to care about other things? I'll replace you. Jessie suddenly raised her head, her eyes filled with shock. That's right. Perhaps to you, the underground queen of Beggar's Nest is a title full of power and glory. But to me, it's just like weeds and wildflowers that can be seen everywhere. There's nothing to be surprised about. I have a greater goal, and I'll never be restricted to a certain place. Therefore, when I don't need something, I'll give it to my most loyal subordinates. Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully as he gently played with Jessie's thick hair. Since it was only a projection of his consciousness, he was in an extremely relaxed state from the beginning to the end. The reason was simple. Even if someone discovered something and ran over to kill him, at most, his consciousness would return to his body. He would not be able to cause any substantial harm. The Titan's vitality was so strong that he did not feel threatened at all. Chapter 9:14. At night, in the basement of a private house in Beggar's Lair, there were more than 40 poor people in ragged clothes sitting together. They all had one thing in common, which was that they were all coughing and their faces were covered with an unhealthy flush. Needless to say, these were the primary symptoms of the plague. Soon, each person would have a fever, nausea, vomiting, and the more serious ones would fall into a coma and eventually lose their lives. So far, there were no priests or magic potions in Neverwinter that could treat them. They could not even alleviate the symptoms, let alone treat them. The streets were filled with the corpses of the plague. The only thing the guards could do was to incinerate them. Looking at these poor people with numb eyes who were almost waiting for death, Jesse took a deep breath and pointed at a statue in the middle. I believe you already know what to do next. Yes, as long as you are willing to offer your faith to the great Benny, I will give you the antidote to the plague. Really? There's really an antidote? A middle-aged man in his 40s suddenly raised his head. Yes. Do you see those potions emitting blue light behind me? As long as you drink it, you will be free from the pain and regain your health. Jesse pointed at the translucent liquid in the glass test tube not far away. The antidote to the plague. The thing that the whole of Neverwinter was looking for like crazy. It was said that Lord Nather had sent a request for help to his traditional ally, Deepwater City, in the hope that they could use their advantage in magic to research a way to cure the plague. It could be said that whoever had the antidote now would become a hero in the hearts of the residents of Neverwinter. Not only would they obtain unimaginable wealth, but they would also receive the gratitude of the people and unimaginable prestige. Antidote. Give me the antidote. As long as it can save my son, I'm willing to give up everything, even my soul. Another young mother, holding a child, trembled with excitement. I'm willing too. Give me a bottle. As long as they could live, no one was willing to die casually, even if they could enter the kingdom of God after death and enjoy inexhaustible food and wine. Feeling that these people were trying their best to grasp at the last straw, Jesse stood next to the statue and shouted, "Shut up, all of you." One by one, he knelt down and prayed to the statue. If it recognizes you, then you can obtain the antidote to the plague for free. Me, I'll go first. The middle-aged man who spoke first rushed forward and knelt down with a sincere look on his face as he praised, "The great Benny, you are the only faith in my heart. He is the only true God in this world." However, before he could finish his sentence, a ball of red light descended from the sky. "Oof, idiot, you want to lie your way out of this?" Jesse sneered. He drew his dagger and slit the man's neck. Puff! Scarlet blood immediately splattered everywhere, and it didn't take long for the ground to be completely dyed red. As for the middle-aged man, he tried to struggle at first, but he soon lost consciousness and fell to the ground with a plop, turning into a warm corpse. Jesse gently wiped the bloodstains on the dagger and warned without raising his head, "If anyone wants to use a performance to cheat the antidote, I advise you to give up on it." "Who's next?" "I'll do it." The young mother carrying the child took a step forward and forced herself not to look at the corpse next to her. She knelt in front of the statue and whispered nervously. The next second, another white light descended from the sky and enveloped her from head to toe. Seeing this scene, Jesse nodded with satisfaction. "You passed. Go and get the antidote. Remember, as a believer, you have to come here to pray once a day. Thank you, great master, for your generosity and kindness." The young mother hurriedly bent down and bowed again. Then she picked up a bottle of medicine on the table and drank half of it for herself and her child. When the cool feeling began to spread from the stomach to the surroundings, the nausea, fever, and vomiting quickly disappeared and was replaced by an indescribable sense of relief. The baby who had been crying nonstop also slowly calmed down. The little face full of tears revealed a calm that had not been seen for many days. The plague had been cured. Everyone present was aware of this very obvious change, and their emotions also became abnormally excited. As the saying goes, if there's a first, there's a second, and if there's a second, there's a third. After about 20 minutes, more than 40 people all drank the medicine and began to kneel in front of the statue devoutly and loudly recite poems of praise. However, if one listened carefully, they would realize that these poems were originally taught to the believers by the priests of the God of Justice. They only changed the names. If it wasn't for Jessie's strong self-control, she would have burst out laughing on the spot. She even imagined, if the priests of the God of Justice saw this scene, how would they react? Would they go mad with anger? Or would they draw their weapons and destroy these poor blasphemers? With the antidote to the plague, a cult that worshipped Benny quickly developed in Beggar's Nest. There was even an ambitious guy who helped to build the framework of the church and began to actively infiltrate the surrounding areas. Using the secrecy and strict organization structure, more and more people had to join in order to survive. Slowly, it formed a huge force. As the number of rich merchants and nobles increased, they began to work together to interfere in politics, business, and trade to benefit themselves and the church. As the saying goes, there's nothing scarier than religion in the world. Perhaps the initial founders of many cults simply wanted to spread their thoughts and ideals to more people. However, as more and more people joined in, it was inevitable that there would be a relationship of interest, thus forming a huge community of interests. Zhang Cheng, who was the culprit, had already absorbed and converted soul energy. He had fused the shred of divinity carried by the broken magic crystals into his body, and he had started to draw power from faith endlessly. He was taking large strides toward evolving into a demigod. Of course, this process couldn't be completed in one go. It would take a long time. Just as he was calming down and waiting to watch a good show, the old butler suddenly barged into the room and reported with a smile, "Young Master Benny, Miss Arabes de Timarand has come to visit. She said that she has something to discuss with you." Zhang Cheng hid the golden light in his eyes and turned around, pretending to be interested. "Did she say what's important?" "I don't know, but I think this is a good opportunity." "Yes, this is indeed a good opportunity." Chapter 9:15. "Good afternoon, Miss Arabes. I heard from the butler that you have something important to discuss with me." Zhang Cheng took the initiative to bow slightly to the female sacred warrior in armor as soon as he arrived in the living room. He could feel how weak and helpless a soul was hidden behind the other party's forceful calmness. The terrible plague in Neverwinter had almost driven Arabes crazy. She was exhausted and helpless. No matter what she did, she could not stop the plague from spreading. The order in the city was on the verge of collapse. Especially in the Peninsula District, where the prison was located, it was completely out of control. The prisoners who broke out of their cages were unscrupulously smashing and looting, venting their bestial instincts caused by the fear of death in their hearts. The docks were not much better. Bold smugglers and sailors even attacked the guards and chased them out of the district. They could do whatever they wanted behind closed doors. It could be said that Lord Nather had now lost control of Neverwinter. He could only order the various districts to be sealed off to ensure the safety of the city center. "Good afternoon, Benny. I do have something important to discuss with you." Erebs forced a smile. "Oh, what is it?" Zhang Cheng asked, pretending to be sincere. "It's about food. To prevent the plague from spreading, the city council has ordered the entire city to be sealed off. Therefore, we will not be able to get food from the outside for a long time, causing the price of food to skyrocket. Now, many civilians have lost their food source. I heard that you had stockpiled a large amount of food before the plague broke out. Therefore, I hope that you can stand up and help the people at this critical time." Erebs directly explained her intentions. After all, the Sacred Warriors were a group of straightforward people. They did not know how to beat around the bush, and they did not know that such things like this should be tested first. "I'm sorry, Miss Timarand. You mean, you want us to donate a large amount of food for free?" The old butler suddenly interrupted with a frown. Erebs nodded slightly. "Yes. The city hall no longer has enough money to buy food. All we can give is our heartfelt gratitude." Hearing this, The old butler could not help but sneer and say sarcastically, "Gratitude? Sorry, Mander Manor does not need any gratitude. If you don't have money, we can accept magic items, potions, and scrolls of equivalent value, but it's impossible to take them away for free. Are you just going to watch those poor people starve?" Erebs asked with an ugly expression. "What does their starvation have to do with us? That's a problem between you and Lord Nazir. It's your people who didn't manage this city well and allowed the magic plague, famine, and chaos to spread everywhere. It's not our fault," the old butler retorted sharply. Erebs was clearly enraged by these words. Her entire body trembled slightly, and her eyes burned with anger. But in the end, her duty as a saint samurai forced her to calm down. She looked at Zhang Cheng and asked, "Benny, are you really not going to use the food you've been hoarding to help the people? I'm really sorry, but I can't make a decision on this matter. Also, I suggest that you don't try to rob them with your guards. My father has placed a large amount of fire glue in the warehouse. It can instantly burn all the food to ashes." Zhang Qing's expression and tone were full of sincerity when he said this. But even a fool could tell that this was not a suggestion, but a blatant threat. He would rather burn it all than donate it for free. "Very good. Very good. I was wrong about you." Erebs was obviously going crazy with anger. She turned around and left without another word. She didn't even stay for a second. Staring at her slender back, Zhang Cheng rubbed his chin and muttered to himself, "She's so easily angered? No wonder not many saint samurai can last until the end. It's too easy to fall into darkness. Young master, do you need me to send someone to continue provoking her and make her lose her mind sooner?" The old butler asked meaningfully. "No, there's no need. Her fall is inevitable. It's fate. There's no way to escape it. What we need to do is wait patiently. But before that, I don't mind teaching that idiot Lord Nazir a lesson. How dare he set his sights on me? He really doesn't know how to spell the word death. Go, find a few people to spread rumors in the city. Say that this plague is actually because he offended the goddess of pestilence and disease. Once he dies, the plague will immediately stop." Zhang Cheng sneered and gave an extremely sinister and vicious order. If this rumor was spread, Lord Nazir would not be able to explain it clearly even if he had 100 mouths. In addition, he had ordered the city to be sealed off and all areas were completely isolated. He had already offended too many people. It would not be long before the anger from the bottom up would completely tear him apart. It was hard to say whether he could survive until the end of the plague, let alone continue to rule Neverwinter. Ah, what a wonderful idea. I can almost see Lord Nazir's rule being overthrown and you becoming the new ruler of this city. The old butler bowed with one hand on his chest, his tone revealing strong expectations. Perhaps. Zhang Cheng did not say that he never intended to rule this city. He only used the people in the city as chess pieces and consumables to carry out a huge experiment. After the experiment was over, it was uncertain whether this city and its residents would still exist. At the same time, Mandane, who was hiding under the big cemetery, was concentrating on placing a freshly buried corpse on the dissection table. Just as he was about to awaken it and turn it into an undead, the half-orc guard Gromin suddenly ran in, covered in blood, and shouted, "Master, not good. There are a few mysterious fellows outside. They have controlled the zombies, skeletons, and mummies that you awakened. It seems like they are planning to do something." They have controlled the undead that I created. Mandane's eyes suddenly lit up. Anyone who could control the undead was either a powerful mage or a priest from the evil camp. No matter which one it was, it would be helpful to his research and could even greatly speed up the progress. There was no hesitation. After making some preparations, Mandane left the hidden underground laboratory and headed toward the area where the other party was under the lead of the half-orc guard Gromin. He did not realize that there was a huge conspiracy behind this terrible plague, nor did he understand that he was about to deal with a powerful and dangerous race. Chapter 9:16. Rumors were the world's most effective, but also the most despicable, vicious, and cheapest way to smear someone's reputation, especially when it was targeted at a person It could always produce unimaginable and terrifying power. It could even turn black into white and then turn white into black. It would cause the person who spread the rumors to have a mental breakdown and a strong urge to commit suicide. In fact, because the people did not really have control over the channels to receive information, they could easily be fooled and take the initiative to become the disseminators and accomplices of the rumors. However, it was a pity that no one in the Pharaon continent had truly realized the power of rumors. Hence, the soldiers who were in charge of maintaining order didn't pay much attention to the rumors that Lord Nasser was the one who caused the plague. After all, the plague was so terrible that almost everyone had lost one or two relatives and friends. It was completely reasonable for them to vent their dissatisfaction with the ruler. However, after a few days, the range of the rumors began to expand, and more people participated in the discussion. The attitude of the citizens began to become strange. Until one day, when a little boy threw a stone and hit Lord Nasser's head when he went out to inspect the situation, causing a fierce conflict between the citizens and the guards. Only then did the rulers of Neverwinter realize the seriousness of the problem. Following that, the bishop and paladins of the god of justice, Tyre, tried to explain to the angry citizens that the rumors were not the truth. But it was too late. Under the influence of Zhang Cheng's church, the originally precarious situation instantly deteriorated. In the end, the pitiful Lord Nasser could not even control the location of the city center. He could only hide in the castle and close the gate, hoping that Deepwater City would develop an antidote soon and then calm the anger of the citizens and restore his rule. However, he did not know that when he entered the castle and cut off contact with the outside world, a terrible purge broke out in the Black Lake district. Tiefling Jesse from the Beggar's Lair led his assassins and used the well-connected sewers to sneak into the homes of the believers of the God of Justice or the hardcore supporters of Lord Nasser. They mercilessly eliminated the root of the problem. After everything was settled, Zhangqing no longer concealed his identity as the underground king of Beggar's Nest. At the same time, he held a meeting in the name of Mandarin to elect a new ruler of Neverwinter. His excuse was very simple, which was the content of the rumors. He also pointed out that Lord Nasser, who was hiding in Neverwinter Castle, was a scumbag who only cared about his own safety and did not care about the lives of the people. He did not deserve to continue ruling this city. As a responsible and compassionate noble, he was willing to donate all the food in the warehouse to ensure that every family would have at least one meal a day. It had to be said, creating rumors to seriously injure the opponent and then using a large number of seemingly selfless donations to win over the stupid people. This extremely shameless trick was almost used by politicians, but every time it was used, countless people would buy it. As expected, a 13-year-old boy was elected as the new Lord of Neverwinter by everyone. As for the pitiful Nasser, of course, he was mercilessly abandoned. More than half of the guards switched sides on the spot and were no longer willing to support him. For the ordinary people who faced the double threat of plague and hunger, they would choose whoever could provide food and antidote to be their ruler. Therefore, under Zhang Cheng's deliberate disregard, the sect that worshipped him secretly expanded rapidly. In just half a month, it had taken in more than half of the entire city's population. It even began to continuously squeeze the living space of the God of Justice, Tyre's church. In the end, a declaration of expulsion signed by the nobles, merchants, and citizens was sent to Lord Nasser hiding in Neverwinter Castle. This former famous adventurer and outstanding warrior picked up the parchment scroll with trembling hands and read it from the beginning to the end. Then he slammed the table and roared furiously, "Bastards! Traitors! How dare they? I built this city with my own hands. No one could take it away from me. Army, where's my army? I want to quell the rebellion. I want to catch them all and hang them all." Hang them all? You want to hang more than half of the city's population? It's not us who betrayed this city. It's you. Look at you now. You don't have any of the courage you had in the past. Since the outbreak of the plague until now, you've been hiding like a coward. Neverwinter doesn't need such a lord. We need a leader who can truly lead us out of pain and despair. The messenger representing Zhang Cheng raised his chin high and spoke with a tone full of contempt. Lord Nasser has been trying to find a way to cure the plague. He has sent a request for help to Deepwater City. The archmages will soon develop an antidote. Erebs, who was standing at the side, could not help but stand up to defend the person she was loyal to. Sorry, madam, we can't wait that long. In addition, there's something I need to officially inform you. This city will no longer believe in Tyre, the god of justice. You and your god will also be expelled. The messenger sneered and said something that made many people present angry. It was a very embarrassing thing for a god to be expelled from a place. It might even trigger a series of chain reactions. Are you serious? A white-bearded bishop stood up and questioned loudly. The messenger nodded without hesitation. Yes, this is the will of all the people of Neverwinter. You've let down this city. You've let down the people who live here. Now we don't need you anymore. Please leave. Very well. I promise you'll regret your foolish decision today. The bishop spat out word by word, his whole body exuding a powerful holy energy. Regret? No. The only thing we regret is that we didn't get rid of you incompetent people earlier. I've already delivered the statement. Please leave the territory of Neverwinter within a month. Goodbye. With that, the messenger walked out of the castle gate with his head held high. Through the long corridor, he could vaguely hear the enthusiastic cheers of the people waiting outside. It was as if they had won a great battle. Damn it, why did things turn out like this? Lord Nasser kicked over the table with his feet, his eyes bloodshot. He simply could not believe that he, who was loved and respected by the people, would suddenly suffer the hostility of the people and even be reduced to the extent of being expelled. Calm down, my friend. There must be a conspiracy behind this. Don't we still have a month? We'll use this month to completely resolve the plague, and then investigate this boy named Benny. Find out who he is, and if there's a demon or devil from the lower planes behind him. Yes. First, we have to solve the plague. Prove that we're not incompetent people. I'll personally go to Deepwater City and see how far the antidote has progressed. Chapter 9:17. Congratulations. Your plan is a success. How does it feel to be the Lord of Neverwinter? Jesse, who was wearing a red ceremonial robe, held a wine glass and glanced at the nobles and wealthy merchants who were celebrating their victory in the hall. As for those pitiful commoners, they were excluded from the scope of this banquet of power from the beginning, just like the bottom of society in all worlds. This was because no matter which interest group became the ruler, the commoner's status as the exploited class would never change. Success? No, my plan has only just begun. As for the identity of the Lord of Neverwinter, it's just a tool for me to achieve my goal, Zhang Cheng explained with a chuckle. There is no doubt that for a master schemer like him, starting a rebellion in a small city like Neverwinter was easier than eating and drinking. Furthermore, Lord Nather was not Silvermoon City's illustrial. The latter not only had unparalleled powerful spellcasting abilities and charisma, but she was also very smart and could deal with all kinds of despicable means. In fact, Lord Nather was not a qualified ruler. He was just lucky to have the support of the God of Justice, Tyre's church. In addition, Deepwater City needed a staunch ally to stop Luskin's expansion. I don't have enough political wisdom, don't have strong ruling skills, don't have enough charisma to convince the people. Even the strong physique and fighting skills that he had trained during his adventures were deteriorating with age. Everything proved that this old man was not worthy of being Zhang Cheng's opponent. The difference between the two was like a small hill on the roadside and Mount Everest. There was no comparison at all. Failure was simply a normal outcome and was nothing to be surprised about. What do you plan to do next? According to the information I received, Luskin in the north seems to have noticed something and is planning to attack Neverwinter. You'd better be mentally prepared. Jessie could not help but tell him the bad news she had just received. She had now become the underground queen of Beggar's Nest and did not want any large-scale turmoil to cause her to lose her current position. Oh, Luskin is finally taking action? Zhang Cheng's lips curled up slightly, revealing a playful smile. The last time he came to this world in the form of a dragon, he had left Luskan with quite a bountiful harvest. Regardless of whether it was the spellcaster's organization that had been reorganized and renamed Arcane Light, the large number of wizards that had been transformed into dragonoids, or Gar's violent army that had drunk the blood of the Abyssal Lord, all of them were enough to cause a terrifying storm in the northern lands. However, Jesse obviously didn't know about this. He reminded with a solemn expression, "Don't underestimate Luskan. They were already different from before." Even the Silver Moon Alliance and the Harpist Alliance didn't dare to approach Luskan's sphere of influence. With the military power of Neverwinter, it's impossible to fight against Luskan alone. We need allies, very, very powerful allies. Ha ha! No, sweetheart. On the contrary, Luskan is our ally. Zhang Chung laughed unscrupulously as he took out a gold coin from his bosom and injected a unique mixture of energy into it. After a while, the coin showed a strange pattern that looked like dragon scales. He directly stuffed the coin into Jesse's hands and said meaningfully, "Send someone to give this thing to Valindra." Valindra? The leader of Arcane Light. Jesse's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's right. Do you think that I only have these few chess pieces under my control? No, the number of chess pieces I have in my hands is beyond your imagination." After saying that, Zhang Chung raised his glass and took a sip of the best wine. His only intact, I was as calm and deep as a lake. "Who are you?" Jessie finally couldn't help but ask the question that had been in her heart for a long time. Although she had long realized that this strange boy was definitely not the cowardly pickpocket Benny, she had never thought that he would be in contact with the higher-ups of Luskan. "Is it important who I am?" Zhang Chang put down his glass and shook his head with a smile. "No, it's not important at all. You only need to know that if you do your job well, you will receive unexpected rewards. You don't need to know too much about other things. Also, don't try to guess my actions from a mortal's point of view. Power, money, honor, and other things that ordinary people dream of obtaining are no different from trash in my eyes." When Jesse heard this, he subconsciously frowned. "Then what do you want?" "Sorry, it's not easy to express what I want in words. Moreover, even if I say it, you might not understand. All right, I think we'll end our conversation here. Give the coin to Valindra for me as soon as possible. If I'm not wrong, Lord Nather will definitely not be willing to lose, and Deepwater City doesn't want to lose a bridgehead against Luskan. In the end, we still have to use strength to speak. I plan to cooperate with Luskan to put on a big show and annihilate the reinforcements sent by Deepwater City to teach them a lesson that they will never forget." When he said this, Zhang Chung didn't hide his malice toward Deepwater City. He planned to use a tragic massacre to bleed the most powerful overlord of the Farron Continent's west coast. He wanted to stop Luskan from meddling in other people's business. "Understood." Jessie placed one hand on her chest and bowed slightly. Then, she turned around and disappeared into the crowd. As soon as she left, a black figure walked out from the corner and asked in a low voice, "Are you sure that Tiefling won't betray us? You actually let her handle such an important matter?" "No, she won't. She doesn't have that kind of courage." "How is it? Did you find the traces of those worms?" Zhangqing asked without turning his head. "I already have a clue, but I'm a little curious. Their activities are so secretive. How did you find them?" The black figure's tone was filled with strong doubts and confusion. "If I said that I have the ability to see the future, would you believe me?" "I don't know, but my intuition tells me that you're not lying." "Then trust your intuition. You'd better be careful. The Creator's race isn't easy to deal with. The magic they possess is ancient and powerful. It's not something that ordinary mages can compare to. I'm not an idiot. I won't easily fight with the enemy. I'm the eyes and ears in the dark. I only record what I see and hear." Chapter 918. Luskan, the city of 1,000 sails, was the northernmost city on the west coast of the Farron Continent. It was a place once controlled by evil mages and was full of chaos, crime, and illegal trade. However, since May 1357 of the Valley Calendar, after the war between the Mathematical Brotherhood, which ruled Luskan, and the allied forces of Neverwinter and Deepwater City, a terrible military coup had completely changed the city. The mathematical brotherhood was forced to disband and reorganize. It changed from a spellcaster organization that was obsessed with infighting to a more powerful and tighter organization, the Light of Arcane. The army with a chaotic command system was also forcibly divided into two parts. One part was the city defense force that maintained law and order in the city and patrolled daily. They were mainly made up of humans and were under the jurisdiction of the city hall. The other part was made up of orcs, half-orcs, barbarians, and different kinds of giants who drank the blood of demons. There were even a few white dragons who were mainly in charge of external battles. In addition, the Navy swept the entire Bay of Swords. Any merchant ship that passed through here had to pay an expensive toll, or they would be mercilessly attacked and robbed. Under the situation where the fleets of Deepwater City and Neverwinter were wiped out, they could only pay the toll obediently and did not dare to make any provocative moves. Similarly, the guild led by Artemis Entreri was also actively eliminating the Harpist, Zinram, and other intelligence organizations that wanted to extend their tentacles into the city. At the same time, they set up strongholds in the enemy's territory to collect useful information. Powerful, evil, overbearing, and aggressive. This was the all-new Luskan that Zhang Cheng had created back then. After his disappearance, the few people who held great power did not have any internal strife over the distribution of power. Instead, they took the initiative to establish a round-table parliament and clearly divided the areas they were in charge of to ensure that they could continue to suppress the surrounding areas and slowly develop and build a country worthy of its name. Coincidentally, today was the day when the monthly round-table parliament was held. As the leader of the Light of Arcane and the brain of the city, Valindra was always the first to arrive. She sat alone on a chair and waited for the others to arrive. The former female apprentice, Sydney, stood beside her, looking at the blue sky, white clouds, and sea outside the window. No one knew what she was thinking. The second to arrive was Artemis Entreri. As usual, he was used to staying in the dark corner of the room. He rarely expressed his opinion, let alone sat on a chair. Soon, the highest commander of the army, the evil Orc-Gars, also arrived. He sat down casually and began to gulp down the strong liquor that he carried with him. His two scarlet eyes glanced at the two female mages opposite him from time to time. Although he hadn't fought in a battle for a long time, he was still a powerful warrior. His entire body exuded a strong smell of blood. As for the fourth person to arrive, it was the actual controller of the Marine, Ian, who had the title of Pirate King. As a half-dragon warrior, he had a long lifespan, so there were no signs of the erosion of time. He smiled and greeted everyone present. Just as Gal was getting impatient and was about to say something, the last person in charge of the city administration, Gildan, finally arrived. This fellow who was born as a soldier had long lost the courage he had in the past. He had put on 2 or 3 rounds of weight, and he even had a beautiful goatee on his chin. He was no different from those shrewd nobles and politicians. Cough. Since everyone is here, let's begin today's meeting, Valindra announced after coughing forcefully. Damn it, what's there to discuss? Just give me the authority, and my army will raze Neverwinter to the ground, Gar shouted as he threw the empty bottle to the side. Compared to scheming, he preferred to use his unparalleled strength to crush his enemies and make them collapse in pain and despair. Don't be hasty. The city hall hasn't finished mobilizing for war. We need time to gather food and all kinds of supplies. Do you think war can be fought so casually? Gildan was the first to stand up and refute. It must be noted that after several years of steady development, coupled with a large number of people fleeing here during the Age of Turmoil, Luskan had become a large city with a population of more than 100,000. The surrounding farms built by slaves and homesteaders were also producing food continuously. However, it was not an easy task to support an army of more than tens of thousands of people. Ian, the Pirate King, shrugged his shoulders indifferently. My fleet is always on standby. We can attack the ports of Neverwinter and Deepwater City at any time. We can even completely block their sea transportation routes. What about the Silvery Moon Alliance? Has Illustrial made any moves recently? Valindra looked directly at the assassin in charge of intelligence. Entreri ignored the question and walked out from a dark corner. He placed a gold coin on the table and said with a slightly hoarse voice, "Before we discuss this, I think you should take a look at this." A gold coin with a unique design. Gildan frowned subconsciously. He had no talent in spellcasting, so he could not see the uniqueness of this gold coin. However, Valindra's pupils suddenly shrank. He carefully held the coin in his palm and felt the energy within it. He then stood up and shouted in ecstasy, "It's Master! This is Master's power. He's finally back." "What?" Sydney rushed forward and snatched the gold coin from Valindra's hand. After a few seconds, she trembled and muttered to herself, "My God, it's really Master. I knew those despicable gods would not be able to defeat him. He's the most powerful dragon in the world." Ha! Neverwinter and Deepwater City, prepare to tremble in front of Master. We will definitely win this war. Gars laughed excitedly. Compared to the others who lost their composure, Ian was much calmer. He directly asked, "Where did this coin come from? If Master has really returned, why didn't he appear in front of us directly?" In fact, this coin was sent by a tiefling called Jessie. She now controls Neverwinter's Beggar's Nest and works for a 13-year-old boy called Benny. As far as I know, this gold coin was created by that boy. Entreri expressionlessly revealed the source of his information. A 13-year-old boy? You mean he's the Master we've been secretly looking for? Valindra seemed to have sensed that something was wrong, and a trace of suspicion appeared in his eyes. "I can't be sure. However, according to what the tiefling said, her master wishes to meet you directly. By the way, this 13-year-old boy has been elected as the new Lord of Neverwinter. At the same time, he has issued an expulsion order to Lord Nather and the Church of Justice." Chapter 919. Neverwinter Academy was once the pride of Neverwinter. It was a comprehensive school that was willing to open its doors to the commoners and teach them all kinds of knowledge, magic, and martial arts. Although the number of students was limited due to the lack of teachers, there were still many people who flocked to the academy. Most importantly, the academy had endlessly nurtured all kinds of talents for Lord Nather. Even though the academy had been forced to close down due to the plague and riots, the most important parts of the academy were still intact. That was the dozen or so experienced teachers, as well as the dozens of students who were about to graduate. Standing in the basement of Neverwinter Castle, Erebs was looking at the young people who were still willing to serve Lord Nather with gratification in her eyes. After all, the betrayal of the entire city's citizens was a huge blow to all the descendants of Overlord Nasser, be it psychologically or materially. If not for the fact that Neverwinter Castle had always stored food for the war, they would probably have no other choice but to leave dejectedly. Because the sinister Zhongcheng had completely cut off the food supply to Neverwinter Castle, no merchant or citizen was willing to sell the already scarce food to a group of losers who had been ordered to be expelled. However, with the arrival of the Deepwater City diplomatic group and the completion of the plague antidote, Erebs believed that she could turn the tables and win back the support of the people of Neverwinter. Just as she was about to say something to the expectant students, a strong wave of spatial energy suddenly appeared out of thin air. Immediately after, teleportation portals opened one after another. Countless goblins rushed out and began slaughtering the students who had yet to react. What was more terrifying was that there were several masked human spellcasters behind the goblins. Compared to the goblins who only knew how to cause trouble and destroy, the goblins were the real threat. In just a few seconds, they had used spells to disrupt the entire underground hall. "Calm down. Pick up your weapons. Kill these intruders," Ereb shouted as she pulled out her long sword and joined the battle. As a paladin who believed in the god of justice, she had fought with many spellcasters from the evil camp. She knew that the best way to deal with a mage was to not be afraid. Even if they were injured, they had to chase after the enemy and attack wildly to ensure that the enemy could not focus on chanting spells. Regardless of whether it was a spell that reflected damage or a spell that completely defended against physical attacks, the duration of the spell would generally not be very long. Once this kind of magic disappeared, it would be time to counterattack. It had to be said that Arabies de Timerland was an excellent melee fighter who knew her own strengths and weaknesses. In the blink of an eye, she had cut down the two masked mages. As for the cowardly goblins, they had long since been slaughtered by the students and teachers who had come to their senses. All that was left were corpses strewn across the ground and the thick stench of blood in the air. But before everyone could catch their breath, a guard covered in blood rushed in from the outside and shouted, "Madam!" The entire basement was filled with goblins and unknown invaders. Even a magical animal sent by Deepwater City to make the plague antidote have been snatched away by them. What? Erebs' expression changed drastically. She immediately sprinted toward the exit. She simply could not believe that such a huge mistake had actually occurred at such a crucial moment. Without the magical creatures sent by Deepwater City, the plague antidote could not be made. If the plague antidote could not be made, they would not be able to regain the trust of the people, let alone take back the ruling power of Neverwinter. In addition, according to the information provided by the Harpist League, the powerful Luskan in the north had also begun to stir and could start a war in the south at any time. Due to Zhang Cheng's interference, Neverwinter was in a miserable state. The slightest carelessness would cause it to fall into the abyss. However, as a common saying in many stories, even the strongest castle could not withstand an attack from within. When Erebs arrived at the exit, she only saw her fiancé, Vanswick, and Deszel fighting with several masked mages and goblins, while the magical creatures from Deepwater City had been teleported away by another mage. No, she watched helplessly as the antidote to the plague, which was about to succeed, was destroyed. Her brain was suddenly dominated by anger. She rushed forward and brandished her long sword like a god of war, descending to the mortal world. In a few moves, she killed all the remaining enemies, not leaving a single one alive. In particular, the large amount of bloodstains on his armor made this saint samurai, who was supposed to be calm and wise, feel out of place. "Erebs, are you all right?" Vanswick obviously sensed something and hurriedly called his fiancée's name. "Of course I'm fine. The entire city of Neverwinter is in trouble. Quick, act immediately. We must immediately find the whereabouts of those 4 creatures." Erebs roared furiously. She did not know why, but she felt a burning flame in her heart and could not control her emotions no matter how hard she tried. Deszel, who was beside her, undoubtedly noticed this. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and a hint of playfulness flashed across his eyes. He immediately echoed, "That's right. We must find the antidote. But since the people of Neverwinter are not friendly to us, I suggest we hire the students of those academies to complete this task." "Hire the students?" Vanswick was stunned. "Yes, hire the students. Many of them have already met the graduation requirements. It's time for them to contribute to the city of Neverwinter. I believe that as long as the pay is high enough, no one will object." Deszel pretended to be serious as he explained, "That makes sense. I'll go talk to the students now." Erebs did not realize that a huge conspiracy was about to happen. She quickly turned around and returned to the underground of the castle to find the students who had survived the sudden situation. Shortly after she left, Deszel took Vanswick's hand and said in a low voice, "My dear friend, I don't know if you've noticed, but Erebs' mood has been a bit abnormal recently. If she continues like this, she'll go astray sooner or later." "No, Erebs won't go astray. She's like me, the most devout believer of the God of Justice. It's just that she's been under too much pressure recently, so she's been acting a bit impatient. Believe me, when things calm down, she'll soon return to normal." Vanswick defended his fiancée. Okay, I believe you. But you have to understand that women sometimes need to be cared for. You have to find a way to help her share some of the pressure." What should I do?" "Of course, you have to take some responsibility. Come with me. The 4 magic creatures are not enough to make the antidote. There's a lot of complicated preparation work." Chapter 9:20. Without a doubt, it was impossible for Neverwinter Castle to send a large number of students to search for traces of magical creatures to escape Zhang Cheng's eyes and ears. In less than an hour, The detailed information of these students, including their names, ages, races, occupations, experiences, personalities, and other details, was arranged into a book and placed on his desk. After briefly flipping through it, he casually threw the book aside and instructed with a smile, "Don't bother about these fellows. They can do whatever they want. Just send someone to keep an eye on them. Also, pay more attention to the envoy group from Deepwater City. I think there must be a spy from the Harp League among them. Leave them alone. Your Excellency, please forgive me for being blunt. These people are all loyal to Lord Nather. Once they find the magical creatures in Deepwater City and create an antidote for the plague, it won't be a good thing for us." An old man who looked to be in his 60s took the initiative to bow and remind him. He was none other than the ambitious schemer and opportunist who had stepped forward to help establish the church. Antidote? No, believe me, this matter isn't that easy. Moreover, even if they create an antidote, what can they do? Most of the people in this city have already accepted my simplified version of the plague antidote. Even if they develop a better one, it will only benefit me. When the time comes, we just have to snatch it and directly distribute it to the people. Isn't that better? Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully. After all, the antidote he provided was only a suppressant and could not completely eradicate the plague. If the infected people did not drink it for a period of time, the plague lurking in their bodies would still relapse. Of course, it wasn't that he couldn't make an antidote that could completely cure the plague. Instead, he wanted to better control the ignorant people. He wanted them to take the antidote again and again, hypnotize them until they completely turned into blind fanatics. All right, since you've already made your decision, I'll pass down the order in a while. As for the envoy group from Deepwater City, please don't worry. Their every move is under our surveillance. Now, every citizen in this city is your eyes and ears, the old man promised solemnly. Very good. Remember, don't act rashly for a period of time. Also, don't provoke Lord Nather and the Church of the God of Justice who are hiding in Neverwinter Castle. If they waited patiently, it wouldn't be long before they were disintegrated from the inside. When the time comes, we just need to guide public opinion. At this point, Zhang Cheng raised his hands and made an upward motion. Boom! The fear, resentment, and anger accumulated by the people of Neverwinter will be released like a burning flame, and then the pearl of the northern region will completely fall into evil. As you wish, my great and wise master. The old man lay on the ground and gently kissed Zhang Cheng's robe before carefully backing out of the room. Watching his back gradually disappear at the end of the corridor, Jesse, who had been hiding in a dark corner for a long time, walked out and reported with a serious expression. The latest news is that Valindra has left Luskan. If there are no accidents, he will arrive at the Neverwinter docks by midnight at the latest. Oh, had she finally come? Not bad. Looks like the whole plan is going well. Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and nodded with satisfaction. Successful? I don't think so. Did you know? Just over an hour ago, a man put a cold dagger to my neck and asked me to pass this news to you. You'd better not cause any accidents, or else I won't accompany you to your death. Jesse's voice was trembling, obviously frightened. But it was no wonder. As an assassin who was proficient in assassination, she only realized that someone had put a dagger to her neck. This meant that there was a huge gap between the two of them. If the other party wanted to, he could slit her throat at any time and let her die of suffocation or excessive blood loss. Haha, don't worry. I mentioned before that Luskan is an ally. There won't be any bloodshed between us. What do you think, my dear Artemis Entreri? As he spoke, Zhang Cheng cast his gaze behind the statue placed in the corner of the room. Ah, you're right. But the prerequisite is that you have to prove your identity first. Accompanied by a deep and hoarse voice, a man in a gray cloak left the cover of the shadows and appeared in the living room. Compared to a few years ago, the assassin looked even more gloomy. His whole body was like a cloud of black mist that appeared and disappeared from sight at any time. Prove? How do you want to prove it? If I remember correctly, I gave you a bottle of magic potion that allowed you to gain faster speed and better coordination. Now, let me see how much you've improved. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng suddenly disappeared from the chair. The next second, asters clink. Asterisk, a crisp sound of metal clashing echoed in the air. He was holding a small knife used to cut fruits in his hand, forcing the famous Entreri to take a few steps back. Teleportation magic? The assassin raised his eyebrows in surprise. No, not magic. It's another kind of power. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head, initiating another attack. Asterisk, clink, 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 clink. Asterisk, in just half a minute, the two had already exchanged dozens of blows. They were so fast that their movements and shadows could not be seen clearly. All that could be seen were the afterimages and the golden sparks that flew out from the clash of weapons. Such an intense and shocking battle. Even the Dark Elf Ranger Drizzt would kneel down in seconds, let alone a half-baked fighter like Jesse. With the energy flowing through his nervous system and muscles, Entreri was no longer his old self. It could even be said that he stood at the top of the mortal warriors of Farron Continent. Zhang Cheng, on the other hand, used the divine power converted from faith to strengthen and modify his weak body. Now, he was almost immune to magic attacks below +3. As for his strength and reaction speed, he could no longer be considered a human half a month ago. He was already at the level of a god. As neither of them had any intention of holding back, the battle was thrilling and exciting. But Entreri was still mortal. In just 2 or 3 minutes, his explosive power began to decline rapidly. He panted and half-knelt on the ground, grinning. "It's you. But why do I feel like you become weaker?" "Weaker? No, my dear friend, I've not become weaker. I've become too strong, so strong that I can't descend in my body. That's why I had to use my consciousness projection. So, are you ready to deal a fatal blow to Deepwater City and those self-righteous gods?" "Ha! Of course. This was an epic battle. This is what I'm after." Chapter 921. There was a saying that went, "Before the troops and horses move, the provisions and fodder move first." For an army preparing for war, there was almost nothing more important than sufficient logistical supplies. However, there were always exceptions. Gathering intelligence was far more important than logistics. Therefore, before Luskin's army set out, the intelligence network had already been fully established in Neverwinter. Valindra had also personally boarded a merchant ship and quietly entered a dilapidated warehouse at the docks. However, she was not in a hurry to meet Zhang Cheng. Instead, she patiently waited for the arrival of the guild leader, Enchantment. As a smart woman, she was very clear about the character of an assassin. He would definitely try to contact her at the first opportunity, so there was no need for her to take the risk. It was better to wait and see. But regrettably, before Valindra could send someone to contact Entreri's men, Entreri himself had already arrived at the warehouse with a strange smile on his face. It must be noted that Enchili was an out-and-out facial paralysis, not to mention extreme emotions such as crying, laughing, angry, painful, and despairing. He even had to ration his meals. He would never eat even the tiniest bit more. Choking with sobs, Chi-chi, 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 www. His entire person, including his work and rest schedule, was like a tightly wound clock that would never make the slightest mistake. "You want to see him? How is it? Is he the master we are looking forward to?" Valindra carefully probed. You could say yes, but you could also say no. Entreri grinned wickedly. Needless to say, he did not have a good personal relationship with Valindra, and they would even have some conflict occasionally. After all, during the reign of the Arcane Brotherhood, the entire intelligence system of Luskin was controlled by the mages. Therefore, after the reorganization, there were still some old fellows who wanted to plant a few spies or moles in the guild. As time went by, conflicts arose between the two sides. Valindra subconsciously frowned. "What do you mean? Was it yes or no? I need an accurate answer." "The body is not, but the soul is. If I'm not mistaken, he must have taken over the body of the boy named Benny." Entreri expressed his guess meaningfully. "Soul? Could it be that Master's body was destroyed in the battle with the gods?" It had to be said that the mages of the evil faction had always been rather imaginative. Valindra immediately thought of the time of troubles, the war that had caused countless gods to tremble in fear. The gods and mortals on the Faerun continent even gave Zhang Cheng a high-end nickname in his dragon form, the Dragon of Destruction, because in this tragic war at least 10 gods were killed and several gods were hunted down and hid, not daring to show their faces. Among them, there was no lack of powerful gods like the god of tyranny, Ban, who directly made the gods who were used to looking down on all living things feel a great threat. Although some unlucky ones were later resurrected by Io, the god of gods, the shadow that blotted out the sky and covered the sun still hung over the heads of the gods. Don't ask me. I don't understand these things. However, one thing was certain, and that was that he was still as evil, terrifying, and crazy as before. In addition, I can feel that this time, he doesn't just want to attack Neverwinter. He has a bigger purpose. Having said that, Enchili didn't care if the other party understood him or not. Instead, he slipped into the shadows and vanished from the warehouse without a trace. Interesting. Then let me see it with my own eyes. Valindra muttered to himself in a low voice. Soon, he pursed his lips, and his eyes sparkled with excitement and anticipation. At the same time, far away in the great hall of Neverwinter Castle, Erebs was expressing her gratitude to a few students who had recovered the magical creatures from Deepwater City. Due to their efforts, the antidote to the plague would be completed soon, and Lord Nather would also take this opportunity to win back the people's hearts. Unfortunately, reality was often crueler than any tragic story. Before Erebs could hand over the rewards to the heroes one by one, a dazzling red light suddenly burst out from the room where the antidote was being made. The next second, boom, the incredible impact of the energy directly overturned the sturdy castle walls, blowing everyone off their feet. When she struggled to get up from the ground, she only saw an unstable portal standing in the middle of the room. Several mages and priests who were helping to make the antidote were lying around it. Only 2 people were missing. One of them was her fiancé, Van Zwick, and the other was Desir, who was in charge of making the antidote. Quick, go after them. Desir betrayed us. A priest of the god of justice stammered out the truth at the last moment before his death. What? Where's Van Zwick? Did he betray us too? Erebs rushed forward and questioned loudly. But this priest had already returned to the embrace of God and could no longer answer any questions. Damn it. Why? Why is it like this again? Ereb's emotions were clearly out of control again. She ignored the injured and jumped into the portal with a ferocious expression. She didn't know that the moment she jumped, the sacred aura unique to sacred warriors had already disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an ominous and cold aura. She has fallen. Lady Erebs de Timirand has fallen. A young sacred samurai began to tremble. He could not accept what he had seen. With her beautiful appearance, powerful skills, and unwavering faith, Erebs was no longer just a sacred samurai. She was the idol of the entire city of Neverwinter. It was because of her existence that so many young people were willing to join the ranks of the sacred samurai. But now, the sacred and beautiful image in the hearts of countless people had suddenly collapsed. One could imagine the mental impact it caused. In just a few minutes, the divine grace on many young sacred samurai was constantly weakening. It was obvious that their faith had been shaken. Fallen. It was never a difficult thing for a sacred samurai. On the contrary, if a survey of the sacred samurai in the entire Faerun continent was done, it would be found that 2/3 of the sacred samurai had fallen, and 1/3 had directly turned to evil and become dark guardians. Many churches of evil gods did not even bother to train their own dark guardians. They only needed to set up a trap to lure young sacred samurai who had just started their career. But Ereb's fall was different. She did not fall for some irresistible temptation. It was the accumulation of fatigue and pressure that broke her last string. Although she and her fiancé did not have an enviable and sweet love, as outsiders imagined, but in her heart, Van Zwick was like a family member, a relative. He was her spiritual support and comfort. Chapter 922. My little cutie has finally fallen. Look at the expression on her face. So angry, so sad, so full of uncontrollable resentment. Through a magical mirror, Zhang Cheng was sitting on a chair in the living room of the Mandine Manor, admiring the battle between Erebs and Desir. Of course, the latter was not much stronger than the former. She had also betrayed the god of guardians, Helm, and fallen to become an evil priestess, constantly summoning demons from the bottomless abyss to assist her. Therefore, rather than a battle between good and evil, this battle was more like a battle between evil and evil. Master, you are still as powerful and evil as before. To think that you could actually tempt a paladin like Erebs to fall. Valindra bowed deeply and took the initiative to compliment Leyland. She was standing in the living room, her eyes filled with reverence. She could feel that the boy in front of her, who looked to be only 13 years old, was the lunatic who had once caused the gods to tremble in fear. Perhaps a person's appearance and body would change, but their soul and character would never change. This was especially so for a soul that was so unique and exuded a dark fragrance. Zhang Cheng chuckled and shook his head. No, my dear. Erebs is not as determined as you think. On the contrary, she is no different from any other mortal. She is half good and half evil. Think about it. Even an evil bastard would suddenly be kind enough to take out a few silver coins when he sees a pitiful girl begging by the roadside. By the same logic, no matter how kind a person is, would they be jealous, angry, or disgusted? Wouldn't they curse an opponent who embarrassed them, or even take a little revenge? That is why we are all a mixture of good and evil, order and chaos. Things like factions can only prove your current state and thoughts. It doesn't mean that there won't be any changes in the future. Under the guidance of the god of justice, Tyre, the first half of Ereb's life was dominated by her good side. However, this didn't mean that her evil side had disappeared. On the contrary, her evil side had always been accumulating strength. When the time was right, it would naturally break through the ground. By the same logic, just because Erebs has fallen doesn't mean that she won't wake up one day and become the righteous paladin again. How do you intend to use her? Valindra probed carefully. It's simple. Let's pull her to our side first, and then find her a spiritual partner, someone who can satisfy her deepest desires. As he spoke, the corners of Zhang Cheng's mouth rose slightly, revealing a playful smile. Valindra immediately understood and replied with a sinister smile. I think Eleanor is a good choice. I'm afraid you don't know how many amazing things she's done in the past few years. She even personally ordered the massacre of several halfling villages that tried to resist Luskin's rule. Eleanor? The little paladin who had fallen according to the script I had written. He was indeed a good candidate. However, this isn't enough. I hope that there will be some sparks between them, the forbidden spark of love. Here, this is a bottle of magic potion that can affect the depths of one's subconscious. When the time comes, mix it in wine and let them drink it at the same time. Zhang Cheng took out a bottle of liquid that emitted a faint pink glow from his pocket. This wasn't an ordinary magic potion. It was a brand new product that he had learned from a book called The Pink Book, and after countless modifications, he had created it. One had to know that this book was a famous forbidden book in the circle of Faron Continent's wizards. It was filled with all kinds of forbidden spells that one could imagine and not imagine. Every mage would never mention anything about it in front of outsiders, but in private, they would often spend the whole night researching it. As time passed, their bodies would deteriorate day by day, and, occasionally, they would suffer from mental disorder and sudden death, and other terrifying phenomena. As for the effects of the potion, it could 100% cause two creatures who drank it to have a strong sense of possessiveness and physiological impulses towards each other, completely ignoring race, gender, appearance, and so on. Understood. I'll take care of this matter. Obviously, Valindra wasn't a newbie in this field. She immediately realized the effect of the liquid in the bottle. After all, she had maintained a very intimate relationship with Sydney all these years. They would even spend the night in the same bed. Don't worry, Erebs hasn't completely fallen into darkness yet. We still have to add fuel to the fire. As the saying goes, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Hasn't Lord Nazir been spreading the news that he wants to create an antidote for the plague recently? If the citizens of Neverwinter know that their antidote was destroyed by 2 people, what will the result be? Zhang Cheng touched his chin and asked meaningfully. They will execute these 2 people in anger. They won't listen to any explanation. They won't go through any trial. Valindra answered with a cold smile. That's right. In order to appease the citizens' anger, Lord Nazir will definitely hand over the innocent Vanswick. When that happens, our dear Lady Erebs will see how weak the justice she believes in is. When her faith completely collapses, she will have a strong desire for revenge driven by anger. When that happens, she will serve whoever can help her kill Lord Azir. Selfishness, pain, despair, anger, and unwillingness. My master, you are still so good at playing with people's hearts. Haha, to me this is just a spice of life, a small game. All right, there aren't any temples in Luskan now, right? Zhang Cheng suddenly asked. Valindra replied without thinking, Of course. Ever since you started the war with the gods, we've eradicated all the churches in our territory and sent those stubborn believers to the mines. When Zhang Cheng heard this news, his eyes immediately lit up and he nodded with satisfaction. Very good. Now, I order you to build a few temples that belong to me in Luskan. I need to borrow the devout faith of the mortals. Borrow faith? Are you planning to become a god? Valindra asked excitedly. You can say that. I want to use this method to confirm what kind of existence the gods are, and what criteria are used to determine their death and resurrection. Zhang Cheng did not hide anything and openly revealed his plan. Without investigation, there was no right to speak. Only by becoming one of the gods could he truly understand what kind of life form the gods were. If it was as he guessed, and they were intelligent life forms that lived in another dimension, then who was stronger than the Titans?